The reason I do what I do is because there's a lot of people with questions out there, a lot of people with lack of faith, and things like miracles can actually crack the door open to faith. In college at Stanford University, I wrote a paper for an archaeology class where the professor said, write about an object, a historical object that's had an impact on the history of the world. And of course, with my background and my love for Our Lady of Guadalupe, I chose the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, known as the Tilma. It was that moment when I was writing that paper that I realized that not only are there's famous miracles of Fatima, Guadalupe, and Lourdes, but there are hundreds or thousands of cases all around the world of miracles where the church has actually said, this has really happened. And so that kind of what set me off into this path of becoming the miracle hunter. I thought that was amazing that the church would stick its neck out and say that something like the Tilma is an authentic miracle.
Let's start talking about this.
Yes, so this is the purported burial cloth of Christ. This perhaps is the most interesting object on the planet. Science can't say how it was made. Miracles are all a little bit complicated, and as you say, God leaves a little bit of wriggle room in there for our faith, to bring our faith to the table. The idea of hoaxes happening, yes, there are always people wanting to make a buck, always people wanting attention, and then there are just pious people who they hear their prayers very clearly, they believe, and so they want to say that God is speaking to them.
How has being the miracle hunter changed your faith, deepened your faith?
This has been truly the great blessing of my life.
Michael O'Neill, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
The miracle hunter. I feel like I'm talking to the real Indiana Jones of the Catholic world.
I've been around the world and seen a lot of things, so
it's awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you published this great book with us, Science and the Miraculous, which we're going to cover a lot of the stuff in here, but there's more in there. But you've done many other, great works. You've been on a lot of podcasts, and Tan, perhaps more than any publisher, loves the miraculous and the mysterious. And we've been all the way back to Joan Carroll Cruz, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
So we've published so many good books: Eucharistic Miracles, Incorruptibles, Mystery Marvels, and Miraculous, I think, Joan. So a lot of stuff. And then you kind of, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but kind of like the new Joan Carroll Cruz in a way, right?
Sure.
With your own flavor to it. But you're a man who is highly accomplished, highly educated, well-respected, had an excellent education, which maybe you can kind of take us into a little bit. But you've dedicated your adult life to investigating and cataloging and preserving these rich mysteries that we have in our faith. And so I just want to thank you for that, because it's very valuable research done in a professional way, not just for Catholics today, but for the future, because everything on the internet could be very questionable, in future generations, and you're preserving the truth of these different miracles. So thank you for your service to the church in that.
Well, yeah, thank you for those kind words. And as you can tell, I love what I do. I've got a strange job, but nobody else has this job, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. It's amazing. But I think that when I first got started, I realized that this is something that a lot of Catholics care about, myself included, but there's nothing out there. I built the website 20 years ago, and there's even less then. But the idea that even the Vatican doesn't have a resource online, and they still don't, of what's an approved miracle or how miracles get approved, that really opened the door for me doing this.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about how you got into this work. You probably were not a 10-year-old kid when your friends were saying, I want to be a police officer and fireman. You said, I want to be a miracle hunter, which if my 10-year-old kid said that, I think it's the coolest thing in the world. And maybe after they watch this, they will say that. But how in the world did you get into this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, as you allude to, there's no such thing as a university degree or a program or maybe even a course on how to study miracles. So this is something that doesn't really exist until I decided to tackle it. But the inspiration for this, I think that like a lot of good things in life, this came from my mother. So when I was young, I grew up Catholic, and she would tell me this story about a miracle that happened in our own family related to her mother, my grandmother. So when my mother was very young, my grandmother fell away from the Catholic faith, as the story is told to me. And she not only stopped going to Mass, but she became antagonistic towards the faith, started throwing away the rosary beads and the statues in the house, and even questioned the belief of her own children. And my mother, who was distraught at the time that her own mother had lost her faith, began to pray to God, as many of us do, make a deal with God. And she said she knew about Our Lady of Guadalupe, and this is in 1950s white America, where Our Lady of Guadalupe isn't really known well. And my mother said, God, if you bring my mother back to the faith, I will become a school teacher someday when I grow up. And every December 12th, on the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, I will tell the story of the miracles of the Tilma and St. Juan Diego. And if you bless me with any children growing up, then I will tell them every December 12th the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Well, fast forward many years later, my grandmother returns back to the Catholic faith. My mother keeps her promise, becomes a school teacher, and for over 30 years, every December 12th, tells them the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And every year, she told us as kids the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it became, to me, the second greatest story that's ever been told. And I just love the story of the Tilma, the miracle, the apparition, everything that has stemmed, all the conversions that came from it. And so even to this day, I talk to my mother every December 12th, and we talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe. So for me, that was sort of the opening of my eyes to miracles, and that sort of got me going, looking at the miraculous.
That's incredible to, the impact that a mother can have on her young child, just simply brushing up against one of the beautiful devotions of the church. I've seen in my own life, raising my kids, being associated with TAN all these years now, that when we expose children particularly to the devotional life of the church, which the Tilma fits much more into than theology or catechesis. It's one thing to kind of hit your kids in the head with the Baltimore Catechism, which I love the Baltimore Catechism. It's another thing to raise them within the devotional life of the church. And it sounds like your mother kind of like made a little deal with God, which we do sometimes, but it exposed you at a very early age to that side of the church. And look at the fruits that it's paying off. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a true blessing. And I cannot even begin to talk about how lucky I am to have this job. The reason I do what I do is because there's a lot of people with questions out there, a lot of people with lack of faith, and things like miracles can actually crack the door open to faith. Maybe it shouldn't be the basis of our faith. Even Jesus would say that don't go chasing miracles, but this really opens us up to faith. And I think that I do this research, I do these television series, I do the radio show, I write the books. So maybe people read it and say, wait a minute, is that real? Is that something I can look at further? And maybe that opens them up to a relationship with Jesus. So my hope is that this opens people's eyes a little bit.
Why do you think God gives us miracles? And part of that question really is the way he does it. On one level, and we'll talk about the Tilma in a little bit, one particular thing, but sometimes it looks like a grandiose, big exposure, here you go, in your face world. But a lot of times it's very subtle, and there's room for doubt, and people question it. And so why does God give us these miracles, but then also kind of leave it a little questionable at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great point. And when I give presentations, I give presentations at parishes and conferences around the country. And and even in the book, Science and the Miraculous, I make this point that all miracles are a little bit complicated. We can talk about the miracles at Lourdes, for example, an incredible place of healing, St. Bernadette Soubirous, in 1858. She digs in the ground and the spring of water comes out and people begin to wash in the water. Eyesight is returned, a withering hand is cured, and thousands of cures have been reported over the years. But when you look at the process that they use, only 71 cures have been validated by the church, just one this past year. And so it's pretty amazing that we have 7 or 8,000 cures that have been investigated, but such a small number. We look at Marian Apparitions. There's no real scientific test whether Marian Apparition is really happening. It's on it's finding a reliable witness and checking their story. Could the children of Fatima just be making it up? That would be a silly thing to assume, but we're relying on their testimony. When we talk about stigmata, for example, stigmata, we talk about the stigmata in the hands of Saint Francis, these nail marks coming out the back, and then Padre Pio receiving wounds in his palms, and then Therese Newman of Germany, 60 lash marks on her back, and a crown of thorns on others. And why is there such a difference between them? Or incorruptible saints. Some are incorruptible for hundreds and hundreds of years, some for a few decades, some completely incorruptible, some only their heart is incorrupt. So why the difference? That's a question for God when we get there. But, I think miracles are all a little bit complicated. And as you say, God leaves a little bit of wriggle room in there for our faith, to bring our faith to the table.
Yeah. Now, this might sound like a silly question, but what is a miracle? I mean, there is in the chapter in your book, you kind of address that because it's not perfectly clear to everybody. And I think in one thing I read or listened to you, I've seen you for quite some time, you talk about little m miracles and big M miracles. So at the beginning here, what is a miracle?
Sure. I think that when we talk about miracles, we talk about a few things. One is that it's unexplained and unexpected and a wonder, perhaps. But the key is that it's something that's worked for the good. When we're talking about just something that science can't yet explain, why do we have an appendix? Why is, what other mysteries there are in the world? We talk about mysteries and marvels. But when we talk about miracles, we're talking about the act of a loving father looking out for us. It's something that has worked for the good. People talk about, the Cubs winning the World Series in 2016 in Chicago, where I'm from, being somewhat of a miracle.
I remember.
Yeah. I mean, they probably shouldn't have won.
What year was it? Which one are you talking
2016.
About? Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that was a miracle. They talked about the miracle. All playoff season, they were talking about the miracle.
Sure. And so we talk about things being worked for the good. Well, I'm a White Sox fan, so for half the city, it wasn't something so good, the rival team winning. But all joking aside, there are big M miracles, these Marian Apparitions and Stigmata and incorruptible saints and weeping statues. And then there are the smaller M miracles, things that the coincidences in our life, those things that God blesses us in a special way. So, but all these things that we see as worked for the good, we can call miracles.
Do you think that sometimes these little M miracles, like in the sense of you're driving somewhere and you find a perfect parking spot just in time because you're at whatever, silly little things, or a lot of times people will see sufferings in their life and they'll look back on it kind of on the other side of the sanctifying journey. And they say, that was a real blessing. That suffering was a blessing. And for me, Michael, it all goes into the real theology of divine providence. And Tan's best books is The Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence, where we see that God is orchestrating this entire universe so that we suffer certain things in the way he wants us to suffer for our own redemption. Never desires us to sin, never desires somebody to sin against us, but he does desire that we sometimes suffer the results of other people's sins so that we can be sanctified through that. It's like a divine medicine given to us by the divine physician. So I wonder sometimes if these little M miracles that we perceive are really simply divine providence just playing out in our lives, and we just are aware of it. Because which one's more miraculous? God turning water into wine, or to just make the sun rise every single day in the same way. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of that divine providence, sometimes that can almost appear miraculous to us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a guest on the Dr. Oz show at one point, and they had a Protestant pastor on there, and then they had me on there to talk about all the norms and the rules of the Catholic Church. And it kind of opened my eyes up in a little way. They asked the Protestant pastor what a miracle is. Of course, I'm rattling off the Church's criteria and all the rules that they go through and all the things they do to investigate. But the Protestant pastor, he said, everything is a miracle, and Just the sun rising, as you say, is a miracle. The fact that we're all alive is a miracle. And yes, that is true on that very basic level. Everything around us is a miracle. But
that's not supernatural.
Correct. That's
Right.
that's the difference, and that's where I dig in with all the ways that the church investigates and the various types of miracles that we can the church declares as constate supernaturalitate, established as supernatural.
Talk to us about what that investigation is like. And you mentioned right before we hit record that some standards have perhaps changed by the Vatican on how they investigate these things. What are the qualifications, et cetera? Because a lot of it's just, cultural traditions and whatnot. But when the Vatican gets involved, there is actually a process. Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. So we're talking about, when we talk about the investigative process of the church, we're talking about beyond the Council of Trent. So 1545 to 1563 is the Council of Trent. Prior to that, we might see that the way miracles were investigated or recognized or celebrated was very different than it is today. So going back in time, you might say that if a miracle were claimed in a parish or a location, maybe the local priest would be involved. Maybe the faithful would just pray and feel good about the miracle. Maybe a bishop might say something. Maybe the Vatican might say something, but there wasn't any structure to it all. And following the Council of Trent, that's when they began this very official process where the local bishop became the person in charge of investigating a miracle. And that's the way it stands today. So if a bishop were to say something about a miracle, no other bishop in the world outside of the Bishop of Rome could make any comment about it. The church doesn't care about what anybody else says but the local bishop. So it's his responsibility alone to initiate an investigation. Now, there have been cases, like in cases of Eucharistic miracles, where the bishop didn't act quickly enough and the host dissolved in water, and it was his prerogative to not investigate. He doesn't have to investigate, but it's on him to do so. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who would say that, well, the church is only looking to prop up these miracles so that people go into the pews and buy rosary beads or donate to the church. It's just kind of a scam. But I think if you were to talk to any local bishop, he would say, other than the Pope visiting his diocese, the biggest chaos he could have is a miracle being claimed in his diocese. So I think they're looking to shut these things down. That's the number one move of the bishop, is to try to let's get everybody back to a normal practice of the faith. But it's those cases that persist where the crowds come, the 70,000 to the Cova de Iria at Fatima, and then they witness the miracle of the sun, or a weeping statue and the crowds keep coming. Then the church has to do something. They have to start that investigation. They use local experts, local scientists, usually not Catholic, to come in and analyze it from an objective point of view and see what's what. And in the vast majority of cases, it's, something, we wouldn't call it a fraud. There are cases of fraud, but sometimes it's just simply a natural explanation. Is it a leaky pipe behind an icon that's causing it to weep? They'll look into that and they'll say this isn't a true miracle. But on these very few rare cases, Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, and maybe about 30 times in history, we see a Marian apparition declared. These are the cases that the church declares constate supernaturalitate. It established as supernatural, and it's good for the whole church to celebrate.
It's almost, I'm a civil lawyer. Technically, I don't practice law, but, there's that standard of beyond reasonable doubt. It's almost something similar to that, where the church does not want to proclaim something as legitimate. I'm not even sure the exact wording they use. You could tell us that approved or recognized. You can talk to us the word, but they're only doing it because they sort of have to, because there's so much evidence. And if there was any simple other explanation, they would pass over it and let this go.
That's right. And I think I've talked to people from other Christian traditions, and they find the church's process a little bit too much, too rigorous, too annoying. Why are there so many rules? Why is there so much investigation? Why is it so precise? Well, it's for that reason that they're not willing to say that something is established as supernatural unless all the other reasons have been ruled out. So I think they're always looking to get those other reasons out there first, and then they have these levels of approval that they go through.
You've studied these so much, you see the rigorous investigations that have gone on to many of the things that we're going to talk about today. Why do you think that it's not more widely known? I mean, the miracles associated with, let's just say, the Tilma, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, it's so mind-blowing. Why isn't every major news outlet doing extensive, coverage of these things? Because, when you get secular doctors involved or investigating Eucharistic miracles, or Padre Pio was investigated by a lot of people, why is it not worldwide news? I don't get that. It's almost like, that's why I think the perception is it's not investigated heavily, because it doesn't seem to be covered very much by the secular news. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there was a recent Eucharistic miracle in the United States, Indiana, I believe, that was claimed, and that was actually covered by secular media. And I was happy to see that, for the very reason that you say, that these things are not paid attention to. And I have a theory about it. One is that when you talk about healing miracles, everybody across the board is okay with it. So we talk about a miraculous cure, and Protestants, Catholics, non-believers all say, "Isn't that great that this person is healthy and God has worked in their life?" And everybody can feel good about that. All of a sudden, when you start talking about the Catholic miracles, Eucharistic miracles, apparitions of Mary, weeping statues of Mary, miracles of the saints, if you start saying that those miracles are legitimate, what do you have to do next? You have to become Catholic. Yeah. So it's kind of a tricky thing to celebrate the miracles, but not then say, where did the miracles come from? What are they associated with? And so I think that's part of the hook.
One of my questions actually is right on that. Do other religions experience miracles? Now, there's one that you can mention in passing, but I kind of want to get to it. There is the Our Lady of Zeitoun.
Yes.
It's a Coptic Marian apparition. We'll talk about that. So it's kind of Catholic, but not exactly Catholic. So, yeah. But what about, have you looked into miracles in Judaism and Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam? Obviously there's the claim of a lot of healing miracles in our Protestant brethren's different. You take the who am I thinking of? The heavy. What was Paul Thigpen, Kevin, before he converted to Catholicism? No. The charismatic denomination. I'm just blanking on it. The very charismatic denomination. Pentecostal. Thank you. Sure. Goodness gracious. God, it took me a while. So, but you have something like these Pentecostal revivals where everyone's coming up and is having a healing. It's happening left and right. It's happening on TV. So, what is your take on miracles happening other places, out within Christianity as a whole, outside of Christianity? Do their religions have a problem with miracles, or do they have their own set of miracles and investigations that we just don't hear about, and they don't hear about ours? How do you handle all that?
Well, I think when we talk about miracles within Christianity, it's easy because Christ can work to anybody who seeks miracles from him. I think that doesn't have to be Catholic, but we see that the investigative process of the church and the promotion of miracles, or the recognition of miracles, very prominent in the Catholic Church. So I think that's pretty easy. And when we talk about incorruptible saints, we're the only ones who are preserving the bones and relics of saints. Nobody else is quite doing that. So there are some specifics to Catholicism. When you step outside of Christianity, perhaps it's more complicated. There are miracles claimed in other traditions, but the emphasis is not there in the same way. So I think that when we're talking about a personal God of Christianity, that's quite different than you step away in Hinduism, for example, if there was some marvel claimed there. So so I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. What about frauds? You've seen some, you've heard some. So, just tell us some of those stories, and what's that all about?
So I think that frauds are obviously a sad thing, that somebody would take their time and look to deceive other people about this. We have cases like the classic one is the pig's fat being put on the eyes of a statue outside, so that when it rains, the water hits the pig's fat and it turns red like blood.
Are you serious?
So I mean that's sort of a classic.
That really happened.
And then there's of course there's the Virgin Mary on toast, which is just some sort of a happenstance, a lucky pareidolia effect of seeing Mary burnt on toast. But
didn't she convert though?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
This is awesome.
So I mean, this is one of my favorite parts of this story, is that people say, "Oh, this is not a real miracle." We have the Tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and then we have the Virgin Mary on toast. We can ignore the Virgin Mary on toast, and yes, the woman from Florida did have a Virgin Mary on toast, and she sold it for $10,000 to eBay or a casino. But as a result of that notoriety, she met a Catholic priest who actually brought her into the faith. So God can work through toast if He needs to. So, but yeah, it's a great point to bring up. God works.
What do you put into
ways.
A toaster? Bread. What do you bring out of a toaster? A conversion.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I've had friends give me gifts like a little insert that you put in your toaster that brings your.
Man.
I mean, just as a joke to sort of tease me for what I do, but. And then we have cases like the Milton Hospital in Boston. When I was there living in Boston years ago, there was this big scene. There was a window at Milton Hospital that started to form an image of the Virgin Mary. It looked like Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I remember my secretary running in one day and saying, "There's a miracle. There's a miracle. You got to go see it." And sure enough, there were huge crowds gathered at this Milton Hospital. And it looked just like Our Lady of Guadalupe from afar. And they were actually, setting up candlelight prayer services and people praying for miracles and healings and blocking people from getting healings the old-fashioned way, getting into the ER. So they had to move that window out. They took it out, and the church investigated it, and on closer appearance, it was condensation, and it didn't look so much like Mary up close. But so there are these things that happen that aren't hoaxes. They aren't. They're not nefarious. They just happen, and then people see what they want to see. But, the idea of hoaxes happening, yes, there are always people wanting to make a buck, always people wanting attention. I think that there was a case in Texas just a few years ago where rose petals were apparently falling from the ceiling. And but there was closed captioning. There was cameras inside the church offices where this was happening, and they caught the woman sprinkling rose petals on top. And so, after further review, the bishop said, video evidence said no miracle. So, unfortunately, there are mentally ill people who want attention, and these things do happen. But thankfully, it's very rare.
Yeah. What about these people that really have a sincere belief that something in their life is miraculous, and you look into it and you find out, or their priest or their bishop looks into it and you say, "Nah, I don't think so." How do they handle that person from a pastoral standpoint?
Sure. And I have to say, I have the funniest inbox in America, the stuff that rolls into me in my email inbox, because people send me their stuff, and I think that, somebody sent me a photo of a doggy door of their house, that from the dog going in and out of the house, the door got dirty, and there was an image of Jesus or Mary on the doggy door. So is that a miracle?
Awesome. Yeah.
But anyway.
We should have used that as the cover for your book.
Next one.
Right there.
Next one. People claiming things like, their mother died and was brought back to life. These are amazing claims that I get sent my way. But I'd say the biggest thing is that people, perhaps who are mentally ill or otherwise, they have ideas in their head about God speaking to them. And then there are just pious people who they hear their prayers very clearly, they believe, and so they want to say that God is speaking to them. So we see different things like that. And other people claim things. But the church is very careful with these things. And you asked pastorally how this happens, I think that, or how they deal with them. I think that the church always wants to recognize authentic miracles and encourage people to pray for miracles and to draw closer to Christ through miracles. But things that are claimed, if they're worthy of looking into, the church will do it, and otherwise they'll gently decline as a miracle.
Yeah. Now, what about Is there any time in history when there's been a dismissed phenomena that later came back to be proven to be miraculous?
That's a great question. And let's see, I'm trying to think of something that, this wasn't proven to be miraculous, but it did come back. I'll mention this very specific case in Lipa in the Philippines. In 1948, there was this Carmelite novice named Teresita Castillo, and she began to claim visions of Mary. And I've actually been to the convent in the Philippines where this all happened. And there was the claim of rose petals falling from the sky and other miracles, healing miracles that were claimed. And this is a devotion that persists even to this day, especially amongst Filipino Americans and Filipinos. But this was shut down by the Catholic Church. And it was in the 2000s that the Bishop Raymond Arguelles, he reignited this devotion, and he started a new investigation many years later, and he came back with an approval saying that it was constate supernaturalitate, the highest level, established as supernatural. So he took something that was condemned and flipped it around and made that decision publicly. And unfortunately, within a year, the Vatican swooped in and recondemned the apparition and kicked him out as bishop. And, and it's no longer an approved apparition, but for a year, it stood on the level of Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, or any of the bishop-approved apparitions of the world. There's been 30 of them. So there have been cases that go back and forth, sort of a ping-pong match between the bishop and Rome.
I even think of a number of saints that kind of went through a time of condemnation, and then history proved them to be in the right. And so I was kind of wondering if miracles might have that as well.
Yeah, no, you're perfect examples of Padre Pio or Faustina, where the church hadn't embraced them or kind of suppressed those devotions for some time, and then reconsidered them, and now we see them as great saints in our church.
Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc is a classic example. But as far as miracles go, I think that the church is always open to investigating. Our Lady of Champion, for example, in Wisconsin, the only approved case in the United States, that happened in 1859 and it was approved in 2010. That didn't necessarily get resurrected in any way, but sometimes the church moves at a glacier's pace, and it takes a while before it gives full consideration to these things.
Have you been there to Wisconsin?
I've been there many times, really? Actually. I'm a Chicago guy myself, so it's a short drive, and I think we did a show on NBC Today with Megyn Kelly. They went up there with me.
That's right.
And then I filmed an episode of my Explore series there, and it's a very special place to me, that shrine. It's and it's the only one in the United States that we see an approved Marian apparition.
Now, Cardinal Burke is one of my favorites, and shout out to Cardinal Burke. I'm going to get you on my show one day. That's my goal. So, is he the one that approved? In 2010, was he the one that was involved in the formality of this, of like making it recognized? Or I don't even have the right terminology. What was his involvement?
So you might be thinking of Our Lady of America in Indiana, which is another alleged apparition that has since been put in this category of non constate supernaturalitate, which is not established as supernatural. We might not say it's a condemned apparition, it's just a maybe apparition, or it doesn't have enough proof. And at some point, Cardinal Burke, who I know well because I worked at his Guadalupe shrine in La Crosse, Wisconsin for some years, so I have the connection with him there. He said that the canonical process was fine when he looked at that Our Lady of America apparition. Okay. And again, I mentioned that a bishop from another diocese can never swoop in and say, "I think that one is good." Because then you could have bishops competing over the world, saying, let's take a vote of which bishops think, there are more bishops saying approved or not approved. It's only the local bishop. But he said that the canonical process was fine, because he's a great canon lawyer, of course. Yeah. But related to Champion, Wisconsin, in 2008, on December 8th, Bishop David L. Ricken of the Diocese of Green Bay was the bishop who had brought together 3 Mariologists prior to that, and they investigated this historical apparition, and he gave that approval. And I was there that day for that approval, which was, it's a very simple church. It was packed with people, a lot of people in Green Bay Packers jerseys and things like this. I'm a Bears fan, so that's hard for me to see even in a church on an important day like that.
And this is like a little church kind of out in a field, right?
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
I've been there. I have
Correct.
been there.
Yeah, it's not a giant basilica. You go to Lourdes, of course, it's like the Catholic Disneyland, or Fatima, this beautiful church of Guadalupe, the basilica that holds 2,000 people. Nope, this is a tiny little country church, and perhaps someday we'll see a basilica or something when the church gives further recognition, perhaps out of Rome for that one.
So then, but Cardinal Burke then built the Guadalupe Shrine in Wisconsin. So two major Wisconsin things associated with an apparition,
Yes, exactly. So in Wisconsin, you have Holy Hill, which is another beautiful shrine. You have the Guadalupe Shrine. That's my favorite shrine in the United States. And like I say, I'm well connected with that one. And then this Our Lady of Champion, the three major shrines of Wisconsin.
Great. Yeah. Now you mentioned again, what was the change in the standards that the Vatican just came out with recently?
Yeah. Thank you for circling back to that. So this is something that was huge news, and the church's document that pre-existed the one that came out in 2024 was from 1978. So the church for almost 50 years hung on to this standard where that was the rule book that the church used for investigation, so of miracles. So it's the norms for proceeding and judging alleged private revelations and apparitions. How's that for a catchy name?
Yeah. It needs a better subtitle.
So this was released to the bishops of the world in 1978, sub secretos, secretly to the world in Latin. And now you could go on any website, including my own. You can read it in English. And this laid out the entire rules for how the church goes through the process of investigating, looking at the life of the visionary, looking at the spiritual fruits, making sure there are no hoaxes, there's no seeking of fame, there's no errors in theology in an alleged apparition, and the levels of approval. So the levels of approval for a condemnation, you'd have this Latin phrase, constate non supernaturalitate, which is established as not supernatural, definitely not supernatural. Then you have the maybe category, which is non constat. It's not established. It might be, it could be, but we're not calling it a miracle. And then constate supernaturalitate. It is established as supernatural. So Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, and any of 30 other cases around the world. And so this was the document that stayed in place for 50 years. And one of the key things about this document is that the vast majority of apparitions have this non constat. Maybe. We don't know. It's not sure. But there are these famous cases where the church says definitively, yes, it is a miracle for all the faithful of the world. Yes, this is established. And the local bishop says this, and then the Vatican can come in with some sign of recognition after that. They could give their own statement. They could build a basilica. They could canonize a visionary. They could give a golden rose. They could compose a prayer. Any number of ways, a feast day perhaps, any number of ways that the Vatican would say, okay, this is legit. Now, fast forward to 2024, everything has changed. They released a new set of norms, and they're overdue 50 years. They should probably update these things. And my theory, which we can get to if you want to, is that they did this for Medjugorje, this long-standing apparition from 1981 in Bosnia-Herzegovina that the church has kind of gone back and forth on and never made a statement on. And so formally from the Vatican. And so this new document, it now has, I believe, 7 levels of approval. Not just the green light, red light, yellow light, the yes, no, and maybe, but this has 7 levels of comment from the Vatican. And perhaps that's good because the church can give a more specific statement about what's going on, either to recommend it or to not recommend it or to put it somewhere in the middle. So that's good. And there's greater transparency as a result of this new document. Strangely, in the past, when a local bishop was investigating an apparition or other miracle, they were not allowed to say that they were talking to the Vatican, but they were required to talk to the Vatican. So it was a complication where they were never allowed to, like the Philippine bishop did, say, I think it's a miracle without having consulted with Rome. But you're not allowed to say out loud that you're working with Rome. So it's a very complicated scenario. So now the new document says that there is no such thing as a approved as supernatural Marian apparition. The highest level of approval is nihil obstat, which means nothing stands in the way.
Nothing. Yeah, you get that in books.
Yes, correct. It's in the couple of first pages of a book. But now the church will never say again that, like Fatima, like Lourdes, like Guadalupe, for all the faithful, this is an approved miracle. This is established as supernatural. So I think that's a huge failure of the document.
Yes, I was about to ask you. I was about to say time out. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. So
that does not being educated in this, that does not sound good to me as a traditional Catholic.
Right. And, some people have joked with me in interviews and otherwise and said, Miracle Hunter, are you out of a job now?
I was about to say that. This is not good for the Miracle Hunter.
Yeah, if there's no such thing as an approved miracle. And so I should say this one caveat, that there is one line in the document, that's one line that says, the Pope on his prerogative can call something a miracle. And so it doesn't say how long that will take, or the process, or if he has to make an announcement and saying he's working with the local bishop, or a deadline, or what words he will use. If he'll just wake up one day and said, remember that thing that happened 50 years ago? I like that one. Or how that would exactly happen. Huge failure of the document. There's no path for something to be declared miraculous.
All right, so I don't understand their motive in that. I do not understand. We're 2,000 years into this thing. And I don't want to sound too accusatory, but is this a progressive kind of agenda by the Vatican, led by Pope Francis? And he's more progressive of a pope than many in our past. We know that. Is this an agenda to like water down the devotions of the church? Is it like cowtailing to secularism and science? What is the motive behind this?
Yeah, and one little side note before we get into that, in the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, they still approve miracles. So there's a little conflict going on that one half approves and the other half doesn't approve miracles, but we can chat about that in a minute. But related to what is the meaning or the cause of all this, and I think that a lot can be drawn from this, and I think one of the motivations for them doing this new document is to increase the speed of statements. So in the past, when the church would do all these interviews and investigations, it would take years and years and decades perhaps for them to come out with a statement. And now the church is able to come out with a statement of the faithful can engage with it or they can ignore it. And so the idea is to fast forward the faithful's engagement with it. However, it's a sad thing for me to see that they have dropped this essential element of declaring it supernatural. But my theory is that the whole reason they did this relates to Medjugorje. Because for years and years, since 1981, the local bishop gave negative statements about Medjugorje. Then in 1991, this Zeitoun declaration, and the bishops of Yugoslavia gave a statement of maybe. Then in 2010, Pope Benedict set up a commission to investigate Medjugorje with theologians, scientists, etc. And then Pope Francis has made comments about it on the airplane, whether it's approved or not. And there's just a huge question of what are Catholics supposed to do with it?
What did he say on the plane?
So I remember this date very specifically because on May 13th, 2017, I was in Fatima for the canonization of the Shepherd Children and the 100-year anniversary. And Pope Francis was there, of course, with 1 million Catholics. And on the plane ride back, he likes to pick up the microphone, which I wish he wouldn't do. But so they said, hey, Fatima was great. What about Medjugorje? And he said that the report is very well done. I've got the report on my desk. And he said, but I don't think of Mary as a postmaster, somebody delivering messages every day. He says, I like to think of her as mother. So he's sort of saying, I have some problems with this. Mm-hmm. And that's a fine thing to say, actually, his own personal conviction about it. But the church never said anything for years and years and years. And there are still millions of people going there. Over 40 million people since 1981 have gone to Medjugorje to see it. But there's no end in sight. The messages persist, and the church kind of wants to make a decision about it. And maybe that was one of the goals of Pope Francis's pontificate was to make a statement about Medjugorje. Maybe that was just to, I don't want to say put an end to it, but to clean it up and to give a statement about it. So how could the church give a statement about established as supernatural and when it's still ongoing? And how could they give a statement of not established as supernatural or established as not supernatural when so many faithful around the world have a devotion there? So what's the solution? Lop off that statement from the church, the possibility of calling it a supernatural event, and just say that there's no problem theologically with it. So my theory is they modified this document just in order to make a statement about Medjugorje.
Which seems very short-sighted in my limited understanding, So, all right, since you're on Medjugorje, and that was clearly a question I have underneath Marian Apparitions, but since we're there, what's your view on it?
Whoa, that is the big question. And
why don't you just give a little background for those listeners who don't understand Medjugorje and why this is a contentious issue within Catholic circles?
Absolutely. So it's a very interesting case. We have 1981, 6 youngsters, people in their teenagers, I guess, received or claimed to receive visions of the Virgin Mary in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the former Yugoslavia. And they received messages from Mary, they said. And this simple town over the years has grown because, like I said, 40 million people have gone there as pilgrims to visit with these visionaries who still receive visions. For some time, they receive visions every single day. Now, some of the visionaries receive them once a year. Some of them receive it daily. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But people still go there, and miracles are claimed there, and conversions are claimed there. I have friends who are Catholic because of Medjugorje, and there are priests like Father Donald Calloway and others who attribute their faith to Medjugorje. So we see a big impact of Medjugorje. But like I mentioned, the church, the local bishop, was very antagonistic towards this phenomena, and actually gave negative judgments repeatedly, saying not only is it a maybe apparition, it is a condemned apparition. So he would say, constate non supernaturalitate. And the local bishop is the only one whose opinion matters. So the Bishop of Mostar, time after time, said not supernatural. Fast forward 1991, the bishop said maybe, and then fast forward to 2024, and we have an approval officially from Rome, where they said, nihil obstat, nothing stands in the way. No comment about supernaturality, but that's what's interesting. And so my theory, you asked the question, and everybody wants to know this answer, how do I feel about Medjugorje? Of course, many conversions, many good spiritual fruits, many miracles are claimed there. Many good things have come out of Medjugorje. But is it truly supernatural? And my theory has always been that the first 7 apparitions, where all the teenagers were together to receive the apparitions on the hill, and after that they disbanded and they received apparitions on their own. The first 7 are likely authentic. And then what happened after there, nobody knows. And so does that mean that apparitions still aren't happening today? I don't really know. Does that mean it should be something condemned? I don't really know. But my belief, my personal opinion, is that the first 7 were, when they were all together, is likely a case of a true apparition. So the church is in this tricky spot of maybe apparitions starting out true, then turning false, or something happening in between. We don't know. But that's my wild theory on what happened.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get to Marian apparitions in general, and I have a lot of questions. Like, for example, I want to ask you, not now, but I'm just kind of giving the listeners a heads up. We're going to talk about Stigmatists. We're going to talk about Marian apparitions, healing miracles, Incorruptibles, Eucharistic miracles, weeping statues, a lot to cover. One of the things I'm going to ask you about the Marian apparitions is, why is there always children involved? Like, it's an interesting question. So, but before we get there, because I don't want to go down the hole of apparitions too much yet, let's turn our attention to the Tilma and the Shroud. And the reason I put these two together, Michael, is I don't know what category they fit in. Like, is it an apparition? Well, there was an apparition, but there are these cloths that are left over. So I don't know which category to put them in. So I made them their own category. So The Tilma, let's tackle first. And you shared that beautiful story of your mother and how she instilled this devotion for you. But if I recall, we didn't talk about your education, but you're a well-educated guy, and you did a paper on this, I think, in an archaeology class or something. So tell us a little bit about that, your personal study of it, and then we're going to pull some images up on it and start talking about it.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I think that one of the things that happened along the path to becoming the miracle hunter, you might say, was that in college at Stanford University, I wrote a paper for an archaeology class where the professor said, write about an object, a historical object that's had an impact on the history of the world. And of course, with my background and my love for Our Lady of Guadalupe, I chose the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, known as the Tilma. And so I wrote that paper, and I think that really, aside from, my mother kind of turning me on to the idea of Our Lady of Guadalupe at a young age, it was this paper that I spent all these hours in the library studying miracles. But it was that moment when I was writing that paper that I realized that not only are there's famous miracles of Fatima, Guadalupe, and Lourdes, but there are hundreds or thousands of cases all around the world of miracles where the church has actually said, this has really happened. And that kind of, as a college student, that blew my mind that the church would actually say, miracles are real, and we are establishing them as supernatural. It's not just nihil obstat, that faithful can believe what they want. It's that there are real miracles truly happening. And so that kind of what set me off into this path of becoming the miracle hunter. That's when I registered the website miraclehunter.com and started loading it with information, because I thought that was amazing that the church would stick its neck out and say that something like the Tilma is an authentic miracle.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what kind of testing again, like you gave us a little summary real quick of Medjugorje. Tell us real quick the story of the Tilma, because maybe some people don't know, and then we'll get into the science of it and the supernatural elements that remain, but the basic story.
Sure. So the date that's given is December 8th, 1531. And this is a time after the Spanish missionaries, the first 12 missionaries, went from Spain to New Mexico, or New Spain, Mexico, and the Franciscans. And they went to bring the faith to the Aztec people there. And so one of those people was this man named Juan Diego, or Qualatzin, before he became Christian. But he had become Christian, and he was actually walking one day to catechism class, and his wife Maria Lucia had recently died, and he was walking along and was climbing over a hill, and he heard the voice of singing. Birds or singing, or he thought maybe that it was even his wife calling to him from heaven. And so he went to the top of the hill, and he encountered a beautiful woman, Our Lady of Guadalupe, this woman in this blue dress, this turquoise dress, glowing like the sun. And she gave him a mission to go talk to the local bishop, or the bishop-elect, Bishop Juan de Zumarraga, and ask him that a church be built to honor her son, to make my son manifest, she said. And Juan Diego was a simple guy, perhaps a tent maker. And he said, I guess I'll go. And so he did, faithfully. He fulfilled the lady's request. And he went to the local bishop, and the local bishop says, oh, sorry, we're not really going to do that. As a good bishop should. He shouldn't just build a church when every person says they saw Mary. And he says, come back with a sign. And so fast forward the story a little bit, Juan Diego encounters the Virgin again, and he says, I need a sign. She puts roses in his cloak called a tilma, and he wraps those roses up, brings them to the bishop. He says, Bishop, I've got your sign for you. I've got these roses. He unfurls the tilma, roses spill out, and on the tilma is emblazoned this image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the bishop, of course, was said to fall to his knees and believe in this claim of Juan Diego. A small church goes on to be built a larger basilica built later, and the new basilica, we might call it, that holds 20,000 people, is there today. So that's the encapsulated version, and we see Juan Diego in 2002 being canonized by the Catholic Church. And the tilma, this cloth, this cloak on this agave fiber, still exists in the church there today. And there we see it. Yeah.
Now, before we kind of get and start like analyzing this, because there's a lot there, more than people realize, right? There's a couple historical significances to this. Number one, I think the roses that appeared, it was like out of season. So it was kind of impossible for there to even be roses.
That's the supposed first miracle, is that the Castilian roses from Spain, which I'm not a botanist, but supposedly the Spanish bishop would have recognized his roses from his own country. But they were blooming in December, which was out of season. So that was supposed to be the miraculous sign.
And then also, this is the ancient Aztec world where, this was a bloody culture and tradition, human sacrifice, perhaps different demonic, diabolic activity way back in the Aztec history. And so we think of South America right now as Catholic, essentially, but it wasn't then. And so this image and then building this church, I think right on this hill that you were talking about where there had been perhaps human sacrifice in the past, is kind of an amazing historical lineage. And then this, like, people don't realize that this brought about the conversion, not just of Mexico, right, but of all of South America, essentially.
Correct. So some people might say that this miracle happening in 1531 is the greatest miracle of the last 500 years, because, as you say, we see the historian Motolinia in Mexico claiming that in the 10 years after the Guadalupe events, 10 million people converted to Catholicism just in Mexico.
10 million.
And then if you go beyond that, all over South America, as you say, you'll see this image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I was in Argentina this past year, and in churches in Argentina, they have, at the bottom of the globe, they have pictures of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So this is a devotion that's spread far and wide.
What does Guadalupe mean?
So there are different ideas behind the name. There's a theory that says Juan Bernardino, the uncle of St. Juan Diego, who was dying at the time of this apparition, where Juan Diego said, I have to run and see my dying uncle. And Mary said, don't worry, I'm going to cure him. You go see the bishop. I left that part of the story out. But when Juan Bernardino receives the vision of Mary curing him, she says, my name is Tequatzalupe, which in the Nahuatl language means she who crushes the head of the serpent. And so when Juan Bernardino talks to the investigators or the bishop later, he says, her name is Tequatzalupe, and they say, Guadalupe, because Our Lady of Guadalupe is the most famous Marian devotion from Spain. So this is a point of controversy, because the Franciscans, when they heard that there was a new Guadalupe showing up in Mexico, they said, no, that's not her name. We're calling her the Virgin of the Tepeyac. That was the name of the hill. We will not call her the same name as our wonderful devotion back in Spain, Guadalupe. And actually, when Christopher Columbus sailed, one of the island nations that he founded was Guadalupe. And that's named after Our Lady of Guadalupe from Spain.
Wow.
And the story there is that in the year 1326, there was this cowherd named Gil Cordero, and he uncovered a statue of the Virgin Mary when his cow died. He moved his cow out of the way and found a statue of Mary, and then Mary appears to him. And that's where they build this wonderful church there in Spain. And so that is the original Our Lady of Guadalupe from Spain, the number one devotion to Our Lady in Spain itself. So that name carried over from the Spanish to the Mexican people, even though there's no real connection between the two.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
Can you walk us through this image? And then Kevin, we also have queued up your picture standing next to it. So if you want to look at that one so that you get size perspective or whatever, but you tell us what to pull up, but just walk us through what you're seeing here that maybe is not completely evident to people looking at it for the first time.
Absolutely. And so, and just to connect, we see at the bottom here the half moon, which you might say is a symbol of Islam, and the name Our Lady of Guadalupe, or Guadalupe, is actually a Muslim name from Spain. And so I mentioned that Tecuatzalupe theory of where the name comes from. That's debated, but others say the name is a Moorish or Muslim name, meaning Wolf River in Spain, Guadalupe. So here we see the connection to the Muslims again, where Mary is standing on that half moon. And we see her with bowed head. So Mary having a bowed head means that she is not a goddess, even though she's standing in front of the sun, which to the native people who would look at this, they could interpret the symbolism on this message, or on this image, as a message. So she's standing in front of the sun. She's greater than the sun, but she has a bowed head. Her hands are praying, and her knee is kicked up in prayer. So
right here,
correct.
You can see I guess this line is showing the bending of the knee
correct.
in her garment.
Yes, correct. And so when you piece all these things together, you have to say that she can't be a goddess because she is praying to God. She is showing deference to God in her prayerful posture. We also see the belt around her waist, and that is a belt of virginity, or of motherhood, I'm sorry. Maternity, correct. And the way her hair is done, supposedly, is a sign of virginity.
Oh.
So we have maternity and virginity in the same image, and the only person who that is Virgin Mary, Mother of God. Oh. And there's one, you can point to this one, it's right below the waistband, her black waistband, the one that looks like a little cross.
What?
Yes, and that is called the Nahui Olin.
Right here?
Yes, correct. And you can see all the arabesques and other symbols on her dress. But,
yeah, there, Kevin. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, correct. But all the other symbols are repeated except for this one.
Really? Okay.
And to the native people, they would have seen this as a symbol of God, north, south, east, and west. He who is everywhere and all-encompassing. So it is right on her womb, which implies that she is carrying God,
the
Son of God. So we have some symbols all over this tilma, and fascinating enough, we see stars on the tilma, which we can talk about as well. But there have been research on the stars. The star pattern has been said to align to December 8th, 1531. They actually, through scientific models, can pull up the star pattern over Mexico City.
Yeah. Okay. So have you seen like the Star of Bethlehem documentary?
Yes, exactly right.
So it's like they're using the same technology.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Wow. So they're able to. So people who don't know, you're able to look up at the stars right now, and you can rewind time and see where they were at certain points anywhere in the world.
At any time in history, anywhere in the world, right?
And so they've done that with Bethlehem. They've done that with like Good Friday, like certain things like that. But they did something similar here, and these stars align with what like Juan Diego would have seen over his area?
Yes, correct. So they say it aligns to December 12th, 1531, and that would have been around the time that Juan Diego showed the tilma to the bishop-elect. And so that's some scientists have attempted to make that correlation.
Do you buy that? Because it just looks like kind of random to me, but I mean, I guess stars look random too. So
I interviewed in Mexico City the head investigator of this star pattern, and he actually shared with me all his documentation after the interview.
Wow.
And in a documentary I did for EWTN, we show some of that correlation, and it's pretty remarkable.
Okay.
To 99%.
Well, that's pretty
So,
strong.
Yeah. So for me, I think that I'm normally skeptical of everything, but I'm quite impressed that there's that much correspondence that we can find. Yeah.
Wow. Now, what are these the rays around it? Is that the sun?
That's believed to be the sun. So again, Mary's standing in
She's
front of the sun,
standing in front. Oh,
so
okay.
that she's greater than the sun.
Okay, that's okay.
Which is sort of a godlike figure for the Aztec people, the sun. So she's greater than their gods.
Now it's clicking. Okay, yeah. So when
She's greater than the moon god. She's standing on the moon.
Gotcha. Okay, so these are so she's standing in front of, meaning like it's behind her, and so that's the rays of the sun. Now what else? Are you going to get to the eye? Like there's something, I don't know. You keep going however you want to do it, because this is great.
So I also interviewed Dr. Jose Aste Tonsman, who passed away this past year, God rest his soul. He's a Peruvian scientist who worked for IBM. And he was the one who did the high-resolution investigation of the eyes of the Tilma.
Kevin, can you Google that? Because there's images out there. Sorry, I should have prepped you for that, but that's probably worth just Googling and then pulling it up, because you do see little figures.
Little figures. And it's interesting. I think that, the idea is that it's the reflection from when Juan Diego unfurled his tilma, and the bishop-elect is there, and the others who are in that room are looking at the tilma. That's what's believed to be reflected in the eyes. So this is on a microscopic level, which is so interesting. Yeah.
Here we go. Is this what you've seen?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, walk us through this.
So we see Juan Diego in this angle, and in the zoom in there, the face to the right.
So this would be his face?
His face, yes. And you can tell this is in a tiny, tiny spot in the eye. And what's so fascinating to me is that the eye has a certain curvature to it. And so scientists who look at this would expect to see the reflection in one part of the eye and then upside down in the other part of the eye. And that's kind of what this Scientist, Dr. Jose Aste Tonsman, discovered, that the effect of a human eye that you would see with a camera is what is actually in the eyes of Mary. And again, people talk about pareidolia, seeing what you want to see. You look at the clouds, you see something in the clouds. Could this be pious imagination? Yes. But what really hooked me was the correspondence between the two eyes. They have the same image in both eyes to a 99% correspondence. To me, that's what's interesting.
Amazing. So that's that face we're seeing it. That's Juan Diego. Is there anything else in the eye? Is like the other bishop? Is the bishop in there?
Yeah, the bishop-elect is in there, and then there are some other people standing around. In another angle, I believe it's the other eye, you'll see more information. So it's kind of fascinating to me. And again, the correspondence between the eyes is noteworthy.
It's incredible.
Right.
It's incredible. What's okay? Anything else that really stands out about the Tilma?
So if you were to ask about the Tilma, you could say, some people say that, I should correct a few things, for example. And the Shroud of Turin, the image on the shroud floats above the shroud.
Yes, it does. And I can't wait to talk about that.
But and the Tilma, the paint actually goes to the backside. And I have so many people angry about this because they think that, that's not true. And I've seen the photograph provided to me by Monsignor Eduardo Chavez, who's the vice postulator for Juan Diego and the keeper of the Guadalupe Center. He showed me photos of the backside of the Tilma. And yes, indeed, the paint does, or the coloring does go through. And there's also been various claims like a heartbeat can be found in the Tilma, and that's not true. Or temperature variations are in the Tilma, that's not true. And there's also the claim that they don't know where the paint comes from, that it's supernatural paint. What is true is that it is different types of paint. So there's oil, there's tempera, and there's other types of paint all in the same image, which no works of art have that.
Kevin, real quick, pull up the image of him standing next to it. Yeah, keep going. So there's paint.
Yes.
All different kinds of paint.
Correct. And so, but they've never been able to identify this. So this is a picture of me standing in front of the actual Tilma.
The actual one.
So again, this is
other people don't get this close.
No, this is truly amazing. A gift as a result of doing a documentary, and so this is amazing. And what you can see up close that you can't see in any other reproduction is the texture of the tilma. It is a very coarse, rough fiber. It's bumpy. Even the lip of Our Lady of Guadalupe protrudes. You can say that God designed, or the design of the tilma incorporates this lip, which is three-dimensional, into the actual tilma. But it was a true blessing to be this close.
Now, maybe like the dumbest question of all I have, but I don't understand what a tilma is. So, I mean, this is like, is it like a big cloth that he cut a hole in it, and that's where you put your head? And this is, I don't get it. I don't even get how it fits on this guy's body, you know.
So in modern times, we use backpacks and luggage to carry things around. But for those people, they didn't have something they carried on their back, or they didn't want to push a wheelbarrow around or whatever they had. They used this tilma, which is a very long apron-like cloth that they can actually throw over their shoulder to walk around with it, but they can also put things inside, and they can carry things in the front. So when Juan Diego brought the roses to the bishop-elect, he was carrying them all in the front. He kind of bundled them up and threw it over his shoulder. But this is a very large cloth, as you can see. You can hardly imagine this being something that somebody wears on themselves. But this is a traditional garment for those people.
Like, is there a spot for his head, or is this just a garment that's tied around him? Like, how's he wear it?
The spot of the head is higher than the top of the frame.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, so, but there is like a slot for his head. It goes in, and then it's like an apron coming down. Okay, so that's kind of what, so this would be like and then maybe there was a part to the back, like a back that went down his back. Okay, almost like a scapular.
I guess like a traditional, like an old form scapular. And you might, you can point to this on the screen, but there's a seam that runs up and down the tilma. You can see it right here.
Oh, there it is. A seam.
So it's actually stitched together. Oh. It is not a continuous garment. You might say.
Yeah.
Seamless garment. Yeah.
Incredible. Now, what about?
But I have to make this one big point.
Please.
Is that this is made out of cactus fiber, the same type of plant that you make tequila from. Okay.
Okay.
And I've actually, years ago, I actually went to the farm down there where they showed you the fiber and gave you a little tequila. But what's interesting about this is that this is not meant to be a long-lasting cloth. The belief is that it would deteriorate in 30 years. That's the standard life of this, made out of cactus fiber. This happened in 1531, and now we're in 2025. And this still exists. And for almost 200 years, this just was exposed to candles and to people rough handling the tilma. They would come up and touch their rosary beads with their medals to it. They would snuggle their faces in it. Says some of the historians, they'd say that this object is really well worn because people come up to it. And they actually did a test where they had the tilma laid out, and they had artists paint, their own versions of the tilma, and they put them in the church and put them next to each other. And over time, the replicas all deteriorated, made of the same exact fiber, but this one still exists, and it's the only object from this time period made of this fiber that exists.
Amazing.
The only object in this condition still surviving. Yeah.
Amazing. What about, you want to turn to the shroud?
Yes.
Talk about that, because it's another garment.
Right. And you asked what we call these objects. You can't call them apparitions.
Right.
We almost don't even want to call them relics, but I think that's technically the big term to call them. But they're akairopoita images. So that is a Greek word that means not made from human hands. There's only a handful of images like this on Earth. The shroud and the tilma are the two most famous ones.
Cairo Pointa.
So
I
something
hear
like
Cairo.
it's like ACHEIROPOEITA.
Something
Something
okay.
like
with
that.
Greek letters. Yeah.
With Greek letters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. By the way, would the what is it called? I always forget Las Lajas.
Yes.
Would that be in this category?
Yes, correct.
Okay, we're gonna get to that.
Yes.
That's this amazing image of Our Lady that's just embedded into the rock, and it's impossible. It's impossible, but we're gonna get to that. Shroud, the shroud. Walk us through the shroud. I'm sure most people know what it is, but let's start talking about this.
Yes. So this is the purported burial cloth of Christ. And this perhaps is the most interesting object on the planet. Partly because science can't say how it was made. We know how everything was made, don't we? But they don't know how the shroud was made. Is it a scorch? Is it a painting? Is it a rub? Is it something else? And this is a linen cloth that this is something that is in Turin in Italy. And this is what we would say the burial cloth of Christ as referenced in the Gospels. And this is something, there's always mysteries to it. There are questions about where it has always been. It has not always been in the possession of the Pope for all time since the cloth happened. And that's the real mystery. They can't explain how it came to be. There's all kinds of incredible aspects to this shroud, but it hasn't always been in the possession of the Pope or the Church for all this time. So that's where the big question mark lies. And you can point to the place where the face is on this cloth. Now, there's all kinds of discolorations on this shroud. And a lot of people look at the shroud and say, well, what are we looking at here? This is a linen fiber cloth, and there's all these kind of red marks and holes all over it. And that's because it was caught in a fire at one point, and it was damaged. Now, one of the interesting things about this cloth was venerated for centuries and centuries as the burial cloth of Christ, but nobody knew it had any information on it. Until Secondo Pio, this photographer, Italian photographer, took some photos of it, and in the negative saw the face of Christ. So I don't know if we have that image that we can pull up.
We do.
So this is the image in the negative, and all of a sudden, our eyes can see something amazing, which is the body of a crucified man.
So on the the positive image as opposed to the negative image, right? If you're just looking at it as a cloth, do you see anything, or just look like what we were just looking at, just smudges kind of?
You see those smudges, those light smudges. Okay. And of course, if you know what you're looking for, you can find it like we just did. But when you see it in the negative, it is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And
if you tell any Catholic who doesn't know about this, or a Protestant or a non-believer, that this cloth exists, people are blown away. To me, this is the most interesting object on earth.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, many, I don't know if controversy is the right word, but there's a lot of science that has been done on this, right? There's been a lot of tests.
Yes.
One of the most interesting ones that I've heard is where the image is within the cloth. You referenced that a minute ago. Can you talk about that? Like, where is this image in the cloth?
Right. So we might say, is there an easy explanation? Is this paint? Has this cloth been painted with or wrapped around a statue or something like that? But what's interesting about this is that the image exists on the very top fibers of this cloth. So it's not painted into the cloth, burned into the cloth. If you were to lop off the very top layer, the image would go away. So it's just on the very thinnest, topmost layer of this linen cloth.
So, kind of strange question. So, let's say this is a cloth. All right. So this side is laying on the table and this side is up, like bottom up. Are you saying that the image is on the top, but Jesus's body was underneath? Is that what you're saying?
We don't know where his body was with the cloth. Was it on the side that where the image is on, or on the other side? There are theories that this happened at the moment of the resurrection, where perhaps through radiation at that key moment, that created the image. Nobody knows how it's made. Even the most pious Catholics, the most Catholic scientists, the people who want the absolute best answer of how this was made, we don't know. But I think one of the ideas is that radiation could create that very top level thin discoloration of the cloth.
If his resurrection, again, I'm going to butcher this a little bit for the shroud experts, and there's all kinds of shroud experts out there, but at the resurrection, if there was a burst of light and his body, does anybody say that his body would have passed through the cloth? And that's maybe how the image got layered
correct.
at the top of
Yes,
it?
correct. I mean, that is one of the theories of how the image was formed.
So if his body was totally consumed in a bright light, then the image could have basically been shot onto it, kind of like a photograph.
I was going to say, think of a photograph. That's exactly what we could be dealing with here.
Okay. Now, walk us through the injuries that you're seeing here.
Sure.
I mean, it's maybe obvious, but maybe not so. I mean, this if it's not Jesus, it's somebody else who got scourged and crowned and crucified.
Correct.
Right? So walk us through the injuries that you're looking at.
So, and that's one of the key things is we know a lot about Roman crucifixion. We could say that, this is just some man on some cloth, but we know it's a Roman crucifixion based on the injuries of Jesus, which correspond, of course, to the gospel accounts as well. And we see, of course, prominently in his wrist there, his wounds, which
Extra blood. That
yes,
would be blood.
Correct. And the blood on the cloth is actually bright red, which some people have attributed to the high bilirubin content, which is due to the beating that his body would have endured, or due to the radiation turning the blood bright red. There's some debate. But
what does that mean? Bilirubin?
Bilirubin, it's a substance in the blood, which apparently, when we talk about the scourging or somebody going through that kind of trauma, your blood, everybody knows that you have a Band-Aid, the blood turns brown. Mm-hmm. But in the shroud, the blood is bright red. How could that be? So the two theories are, one, high bilirubin content from the beating he went through, or the radiation affecting the blood and causing it to be the bright red color that it is today. Because they do know it is human blood of blood type AB. So they do know that for a fact that we're dealing with human blood on the shroud.
And AB, isn't that predominant in Middle Eastern men?
Correct.
So if you are beaten severely and you bleed in like a unusually traumatic way, then your blood is likely to be extra red?
That is one theory that I've read.
Okay.
So again, the two competing theories, because we would expect the blood to be brown on this cloth, but it's bright red. So the two theories that I've heard presented is this bilirubin concept or the radiation concept. So
okay, what else?
So we see different scourge marks or lash marks on the body.
Just all over the back. It's just everywhere.
Everywhere, exactly.
Back down his legs, his calves.
And various doctors and scientists have looked at this and said, the wounds do correspond to the Gospels, and they, anatomically correct. This is a real person. This is not a statue. This is not the flow of the blood, for example, would be, you can see the blood on the arms, etc. Flowing down would be from somebody laying down. And we see on his forehead as well.
The crown of thorns.
Yes, blood crown. So
is the foot wound, does it show that the nails would have gone through the ankles or through the foot?
I don't know this exactly. I know there are different scientists who have commented about where exactly it's gone through on the hands. Some say it went through the palms and then back out through the wrists, and then on the feet there are theories about how that entered as well. I don't have that expertise, but
the palm and out through the wrist.
Yep.
Like that.
Correct. I mean that again. These are theories that people are drawing from seeing this image.
So if they put a nail in at a downward angle here, but I find that a little significant because when we get to Stigmatists, you know where I'm going.
Yes, I do.
I never thought about that. I've never heard that it could be that angle, but I've always wondered why some Stigmatists have it here and some Stigmatists have it here.
I'm glad we're going to talk about
and that angle going down through the palm and out the wrist could help explain that.
Correct.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I did not saying cool about torture. That's the wrong word.
Fascinating. But For me, one of the most fascinating things about this shroud is the material and the pollen on the shroud.
Okay.
So this shroud has existed in France, Italy, and the Holy Land. If it were truly a hoax, wouldn't we expect this cloth to be found from plants and materials found in France or Italy? No, it's from plants from the Middle East, the place of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And also pollen. They are able to trace where the shroud has been over the years because of the pollen that's on the shroud, from the Middle East to France to Italy. And this is before anybody knew anything about pollen.
Right.
So let's say somebody in the 1200s is when some of the dating said it was, had this idea to make this cloth.
They couldn't have forged
Why
that.
would they have thought to do that?
Wow.
So to me, that's amazing.
That's a great point. They would not have known to be that fraudulent. They wouldn't have known to fake that.
They wouldn't know what they didn't know.
Right.
And so, of course, 1988 was the big year when they did the testing at the University of Arizona and other universities around the world. And they came back with a very disappointing result that made people disregard the shroud for years. But now the shroud is back in the news. But that dating said that it was from 1200 or so. And that about lines up to where how long they've known where the shroud was. So once that news came out, everybody said, all right, we know it's a fake.
Right. But explain why that was a bogus test.
So there are different theories on this. The one theory is that because of the fire, where some of the cloth was destroyed, the nuns or the other caretakers of that shrine wanted to repatch the shroud and put it into one sheet. And so the areas that were burned off are actually replaced by newer cloth in around the year 1200. So when they did the samples, they didn't take the samples from the center of the cloth. They took it from the repatched or rewoven areas.
Around the edge?
On the edge.
Do you know if it was like this part or was it like around the edge?
It's the edge.
Okay, like
it's the very
edge.
To be the least destructive possible.
Sure.
And you can actually, there have been studies done this on a microscopic level. You can see that the weave changes in that time period when they repaired it. And a different material was used in the weave. So, and that was the area that they used for the testing.
Does this have a preservation factor to it, like a mysterious preservation to the actual cloth like the Tilma has?
I don't know if this would have been expected to deteriorate in the same way that the Tilma had,
yeah.
but I do know today they don't show the shroud publicly anymore.
Probably to preserve it.
To preserve it, right?
One of the things that just strikes me with this is, for some reason, the backside just shocks me because the scourging was atrocious. I mean, it looks like the scourging was a death sentence itself.
Sure.
And it was just the beginning.
Yeah, and apparently the Romans knew how to get somebody right to the point of death, but not kill them to maximize the pain.
Mm-hmm. Question on this, and then Kevin, in a minute, we'll turn to maybe some of the AI models, which I just think is fun to look at. But recently, there has been a resurgence, very recently, I think like just this Lent, thank goodness for Twitter or X or whatever, X, that Bernard of Clairvaux, who's one of my favorite saints, and I mean, I just love that man. He doesn't get enough press. He had a mystical experience where he learned of a new wound of Christ called the shoulder wound of Christ. And he wrote a prayer about a devotion to the shoulder wound. That has gone around recently. Very few people knew about that. I mean, I didn't, even though I read Bernard. I never caught on to that. And then I read that Padre Pio, a young John Paul II, went to see him. I guess he was still a priest, and he spent a week or something with Padre Pio before Padre Pio was famous. And he asked him, what's your most painful wound from the Stigmata? And he surprisingly said, the shoulder wound of Christ that no one else knows about. And then after his death, the people that took care of him found on his cloth all this blood on his shoulder. Did I get all that right?
Yes, that's what I've learned as well, is that that was his most painful wound, Padre Pio.
I wonder if it's, when somebody analyzes this closely, if they're seeing something unique about the shoulder. I mean, you got scourge marks up there, but I guess the cross digging into his shoulder. And then also, I wonder, I think maybe I got this from Mel Gibson's Passion movie, but when he's being crucified, they really yank his shoulder out to get to stretch it out to where he can be nailed to the cross. I wonder if there was even like a dislocation pain. I don't know, but this is an amazing thing. You want to turn and see the AI reproduction?
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, now what's this one?
It's like a 3D kind of extrusion.
Wow. Okay, so this looks like above. Oh, this reminds me of a question. I don't know how much you know about this. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think it's Dr. Gilbert Lavoie who wrote a book on the Shroud of Turin. He's published a couple books. He argues, I don't want to misquote him or misexplain, but he thinks that the body, this is an image of a body that's like upright, that it's been elevated to where head up versus laying flat. And part of his argument for that is, for example, his hair is hanging down. If it was laying flat on his back, the hair would be compressed back. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I definitely know. We don't know how the image was made, but yes, there are different things that point to it being an upright image, in his book especially, or his report does mention that.
So, I mean, if, like, just trying to think logistically, you're a dead body, you resurrect, you stand up, are you levitating? And
right.
then you take off the cloth and you leave it there, and then it ends up in Turin later. I mean, I'm trying to think how that happens,
Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries related to the shroud, and these are all good questions for heaven, I think.
But there's a lot of speculation.
There's a lot of speculation, right?
Kevin, what about the other one where you actually see his face?
Can you pull your microphones a little closer to you?
Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. So if I understand, Kevin, that this is AI taking the image from the shroud and showing us what he could have looked like, which is just incredible. You had some other ones there, Kevin. Didn't you have like some other things? I mean, again, this is all just kind of like AI, but it's a good use of AI, I think, So I think he's pulling up. Yeah, I mean, these are just other images that AI has generated from the shroud. And these are all just based on that shroud image. I just think it's quite remarkable. But our Lord looks something like that. I mean, it's not far off from what he really looked like, if you believe in the shroud, Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for that. Now, do you believe in the shroud?
I do. Not everybody does, of course, and I think the gap in history is probably what a lot of people have trouble with. The holy winding sheet, where was it up until the year 1200? And there's lots of theories about where it was, but I think that's a problem for a lot of people, the lack of historical record. However, things like the pollen and the commentary of the scientists who have looked at the body, who else could this be? And as I started off saying, the mere fact that they don't know how it was made, they can't make a reproduction of this. To me, that's mind-blowing in this day and age. So for me, this is the burial cloth of Christ.
The greatest, what would you call the greatest possession, the greatest artifact in the history of the world?
Correct.
Amazing. Let's turn, related concept is to the Stigmatists. Let's talk about Stigmatists. Just tell for people who might not know, what the heck is a Stigmatist, and also why would this be? Why would God do this to somebody?
So for those people who don't know, there is this phenomenon in the Catholic Church known as stigmata, which is a Greek word which means marking. And there have been several hundred saints in Christian history who have borne the wounds of Christ, starting with St. Francis of Assisi first. And so it's a fascinating phenomena, and it brings up a lot of questions. And I guess one big question that you mentioned is the why of it. Why would this strange phenomena happen? And we might say that this is a way that those people who have a great devotion to the passion of Christ, or a great love for Christ and his wounds, they connect in a very personal, real way. And, sometimes I go back and forth saying, is this a blessing or a curse, right? Because these people who have the stigmata, these are painful wounds. These are things that manifest in remarkable ways, and drawing the attention they draw. I'm sure it's all a complication. And so do we call this a blessing or a curse? But for those saints who have received these wounds, this is one of the great mystical phenomena in the history of our Catholic Church. But there are questions. The questions are, how come the wounds show up differently on different people? Mm-hmm. And there have been numerous studies on the stigmata where they've taken these people and tried to, through hypnosis, make wounds appear on the human body.
Really?
With the idea that if you can hypnotize a person and tell them to think themselves into wounds, then this is clearly a psychosomatic phenomena. We're dealing with the craziness of stigmatists over history, or they're mentally unstable. That's why these wounds are appearing, not because this is something divine. So in all the tests on the stigmata, there have been exactly 0 cases of non-superficial wounds manifesting on human bodies. So we know that it is not purely mind over matter, you might say. And so what is it? Why do we have this variability between, some in the wrists, some in the palms, some like Therese Newman of Germany, 60 lash marks on the back, some a crown of thorns, some all 5 wounds, the hands, the wrists, or the hands, the side, the feet? Why do we see it so differently in so many different people? And again, it's a question for God when we get to heaven. But the way that I've come to understand it is that God gives these wounds to mystics in the way that they understand the passion. So mystics meet God halfway. So perhaps it's their own artwork in their homes of their statues. Perhaps it's their own imagination of how they understand the passion to occur. And then God blesses them, meets them halfway, and allows these wounds to manifest. So that's the only way for me that it's possible to have such variability in the wounds of the stigmata. Some people have said to me, well, if the wounds don't match up exactly, it's got to be fake. It's got to be false. But to me, if the mystics have an understanding, a connection to the passion in their own heart or mind, and God is working through that, that's how that could be.
Well, Mary appears in the cultural physical appearance that she's appearing, right?
That's right. Different countries around the world, speaking different languages, different outfits. So she's a woman; she can wear whatever she wants, wherever she wants. But I think that God tailors these miracles for the person.
Yeah, and that the difference in stigmata makes perfect sense then. I could see if Jesus was appearing to somebody, he wouldn't always have to appear exactly the way he was. I mean, you appear to people the way you would kind of expect them. He meets them halfway. That's kind of a beautiful concept.
On the road to Emmaus, he doesn't appear as they could recognize him at first.
Yeah. What about the invisible stigmata? Because that's weird. And of course, if you're looking to poke holes in this stuff, you say, well, that's fake.
So there are some saints who have claimed invisible stigmata, that is where they feel the pains of the wounds, perhaps the burning or hurting sensation in those areas. Perhaps God has, through some interior knowledge or some sort of a message, given them the idea that they have those wounds. Of course, these can't be validated by science in any kind of a way. But when we talk about holy people, we tend to take their word for it, I suppose. But when we talk about stigmata as well, is that stigmata on some saints, it comes and goes. Maybe at 3 p.m. on a Friday, something like this, or on certain days they have the stigmata. It's not continuous. Other saints like Padre Pio had wounds continuously for 50 years.
Kevin, just pull up a picture of Padre Pio's stigmata, because I guess he's the most famous stigmatist, Oh,
And here I
that's
am.
not Padre Pio.
This is
This is you.
This is at the 50th anniversary for Padre Pio, Padre Pio's death in 2018. There was something like 400,000 people there in San Giovanni Rotondo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So talk to us a little bit about his, because at least in the pictures I've seen, it always looks like a big smudge, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, his wounds bled profusely, so that's why we see him wearing gloves in many occasions. And other occasions, you see the blood spread around quite a bit. But
Would the hole have been small and the blood just spilled out? I mean, that's not a huge hole, right? Or was there holes?
there were holes, yeah.
And what kind of investigation was done on him? Like during his lifetime, did he bring doctors over from secular universities and here, check it out, I got nothing to hide? I mean, how did they handle this?
Yeah, he definitely was investigated by doctors, and one of his younger doctors was alive as of a couple of years ago. I'm not sure, even in recent years. So, but they definitely with stigmatics, they will watch them overnight. It's a continual observance, and they want to make sure that they're not disappearing to their rooms, cutting a hole in their hands with an implement or with acid, and then coming back out and showing their wounds. So they watch them continuously to make sure that the wounds open and close. And one of the signs of an authentic stigmata is the wounds don't fester. We don't see sort of infection occurring. There is a woman named Mirna Nazur. I don't know if you've heard this name, from Damascus. And she is a modern stigmatic, and I've investigated, or I've met with her, and I've interviewed her before.
Are there images of her?
I don't have images of her, but they're online.
Can you say that name again, Kevin?
Mirna, Myrna, Nazur, Nazzour.
Nazzour.
From Damascus. And she has the stigmata on the days when Orthodox Easter and Roman Catholic Easter are on the same day. And what's fascinating about her is that because of this, they know exactly when the wounds will appear. And so scientists have actually gathered around her, and they videotaped it. So you can go on YouTube, actually, and you can see her hands being completely dry, and then the wounds opening up.
And it just on that particular, and how often does that happen? Is it like a cycle of every couple of years or something?
It's every several years.
Every several years. Okay, wow. So maybe we'll try to find later, like the YouTube video of her, of something opening up on her hand. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, so there are several hundred cases of stigmatists throughout the years.
Do you think that means that lady right there, what's her name, Myrna?
Myrna.
Do you think that means that she's basically saintly? I mean, do you think does he reserve this for the holiest of us, or did just random average Joe get it?
It's such a good question, because we want to say, is the stigmata that marking? Is that the marking of a saint? And when such a saint has visions, do we really need to pay attention to the visions of a stigmatic? Those are all good questions that I don't even have the answer for. But I would say that we can go by this, that there have been
here,
and this is her when she's younger.
So there's her hand, and it just starts to open.
And they have the camera on her the whole time.
I've never heard of this one.
And I have to say that when I interviewed her,
you did?
Yeah, I sat down with her, filmed an interview with her.
How old would she be now?
She's in her 60s now.
Okay.
She was the most down-to-earth person you'd ever meet. We all have this idea that something weird has to be going on with, I mean, these are very unique circumstances, but we might think that it would be a very strange person to talk to. But she's quite a.
And it looks like she's got crown of thorns.
Yep, correct.
Incredible.
And of course, this is worth noting that the Catholic Church never, ever will declare a stigmata as authentic while a person is alive, for the very reason that you're saying. that it's kind of tantamount to canonizing a living person.
Yeah.
So she has met with Pope Francis and, her local bishop and all this. So we
is she like in pain? I mean, obviously that's kind of a silly question, but she's like rolling in the bed and in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Is she feeling it in her hands, or does she feel terrible all over? Like what is she feeling when this is happening?
If I remember from our conversation, she did have localized pain. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I asked you to cue up Teresa
Newman.
Now, for our listeners or our viewers, if you're not familiar with this is the most bloody looking stigmatist you're going to find, right? I mean, maybe not, but that's in the images of her. Like, if your little kids are watching, you might want to make your own decision about whether they see this, but this is bloody. Mm-hmm. But that's the reason I kind of want to show it is, look, I'm not like a big skeptic, but if somebody was looking at some of these images, they could say that looks fake. It looks like they put something on her face, especially the blood on the face, which we'll look at. But do you know much about her?
So she's a German mystic from Conyers, Germany. Perhaps she's a servant of God, so her canonization cause is being considered. One of the things that's most remarkable is the lash marks on her back.
I haven't seen that. I've seen just the blood stains through her clothes, but okay.
But what I mean to say is that you can talk about somebody poking holes in their hands, but getting lash marks on your back, that's harder to accomplish.
It is. Kevin, why don't you want to put on the image of, so early on, okay, there's holes in her hands, and then her eyes, so this is one of the weird parts, is she's got a lot of these pictures of her in this, there. This is, and there's videos of her, right? Mm-hmm. And so why, I don't think of face as stigmata. So look at that. Just hold there for a second. Why are her eyelids bleeding?
Yeah. It's mysterious. And then we talk about Rhoda Wise. I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
No.
Rhoda Wise from Canton, Ohio. She's also a servant of God. And her claim to fame was that, she has several claims to fame, but when Rita Rizzo, the founder of EWTN, was very young, in her teens, she was very sick, and she went to Rhoda Wise in her home, and she got a healing. And of course, she goes on to join the convent and found EWTN. So at EWTN, Rhoda Wise is a very important person.
Now it rings a bell because I read her biography.
But she is a stigmatic as well. And if you were to find images of Rhoda Wise, you would see her bleeding from her eyes as well.
Really?
So I don't understand that aspect of stigmata, why that would be, because it doesn't correspond to the crucifixion the way that we think. But yeah, so there are several stigmatics who have this.
If I had to guess, which is maybe dangerous, but these people, like Teresa there is in like some kind of ecstatic, well, here, this is it. She's like in this ecstasy. She's like reaching forward for something. Like she's seeing something that you and I are not seeing, right? Yeah. And so just pause it there, Kevin. That's not too gory or anything. But
yeah, these are hard images to look at.
They are. But maybe it has to do with she's seeing the passion of our Lord, and so it's too much for the human eye, and so she starts bleeding. I'm totally guessing, but maybe there's some symbolism there of what she's seeing in her ecstasy.
Yeah, it's hard to know, and without having done the research ourselves or being present for that, we can't even vet them. But this is something that the church has looked at, and again, her cause is open for canonization.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Kevin. You can turn that off. But that's why I gave that disclaimer. But she's a famous one. We have a book on her at TAN, her biography with all those images. And for people that want to, you can Google her, look on YouTube, and you have videos of her. And thousands of people would line up, and I think even come through her room and see her.
Yes.
So I mean, if she's faking, if this thing is fake, she was absolutely torturing herself. If this is fake,
right.
I mean, that would be a a human achievement to torture yourself to that level that is hard to believe.
Yeah, same story with Rhoda Wise. This one from Canton, Ohio, is that people would line up for blocks and blocks, and they'd come and see her in her home. So yeah, these are strange phenomena for sure.
So I was going to ask you about Stigmata today, and you mentioned that one. Are there others around the United States, for example? I mean, I remember being a kid and an alleged stigmatist came to our parish and talked, but she had mittens on, or something that covering her hands. So I don't remember her name or anything like that, but people do go around and talk about this. What's your experience there?
I've definitely spoken with alleged stigmatics, and Marian Apparitions, like I say, I interviewed her, and there is a small number of cases around the world for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to bring order and clarity back into your family life? Hey, I got 16 kids and I understand better than anyone we need to do that. So my wife and I, Ashley, we developed a 6-part family management system to do just that. And it's based on concrete business tools and principles that you can apply in the day-to-day running of your household. So please come to wellorderedfamily.com, check out our tools, our books, and most importantly, our one-on-one coaching so that we can work directly with you and customize a program to help your family get to the next level. Let's turn to Marian Apparitions.
Great.
Want to?
Yes.
All right. So first, that was a fascinating thing we learned is there will no longer be, unless a pope reverses it, approved Marian Apparitions. Is that the right terminology?
So the highest level of approval now is nihil obstat, which means faithful can engage with it with no problems.
Right.
But they're not saying anything supernatural anymore.
Why kids? Why are there? Bernadette Subaru was a teenage girl. The children of Fatima, the children of Medjugorje, even Garabandal, which we'll talk about because I have questions on that one. But maybe others. I don't. That's just my limited knowledge. But it seems to be kids a lot. What's that about?
So it's interesting. It's such a good, and I hate to say common question or perception that God only chooses children, and maybe because of their simplicity, their pureness of heart, purity of heart, maybe that's why we see some of these very famous cases. But when you look at all the data over the course of the 30 or so highly approved apparitions, we see that the average age of a visionary is indeed something like 15 or so. But it turns out that in the history of the church, and especially modern history, the majority of visionaries are actually adults. But these very famous cases, Fatima children and St. Bernadette, are young. So there's a great bit of variety. And we always say, doesn't Mary only appear to shepherd children or poor children or things like this? But there are cases where she's been seen by popes and others. Alphonse Ratisbonne, a wealthy Jew in France, received the visions of Mary that were approved by the church. So I think that there's great variety in the people who see her.
Why are there secrets sometimes associated? Maybe it's very few. Maybe we just hear about the Fatima secret, but there are some other secrets, I think. So
sure.
It seems like that's intertwined somehow with Marian Apparitions.
So again, when we look at the set of perhaps 30 most highly approved Marian Apparitions, very few of them have secrets.
Okay.
There is some claim that there was a Lourdes secret. I've never seen it, and maybe that's the whole point. It's a secret. At La Salette, famously in 1846, the two children there were said to receive secrets, and there's complications with how those were revealed to the world. And then Fatima, of course, and Medjugorje, there's said to be 10 secrets as well. So we do have a few famous ones in there. But
do we know the 10?
Nope.
None of them?
We know 0 of the 10 secrets. So there's speculation. There's been interviews with the visionaries over the years over what they are, and some people have sort of pieced together a list of some sort, but it's never been revealed in a big way. And apparently, maybe when the end of the world is happening, we'd find out.
Controversial Marian apparitions. Conyers, Georgia is one of them. And so you have to be kind of like a certain age to remember
Nancy
that.
Fowler, 1980s, right?
Yeah. So what do you have to say on that one? Was it well, I'll just stop there. I'll let you answer the question.
So Conyers, Georgia, Nancy Fowler. She was, there's been a handful of visionaries from the United States who have gained some attention, and I think it's worth noting. This doesn't prove it's true or false, but all the visionaries from the United States have all been to Medjugorje. To a person, any of the ones that have received or gotten media attention anyway. So I think there's some Medjugorje connection, of course. But what's interesting about Nancy Fowler is the crowds that came. People come out for these things. I think, there we go. In the 1980s, you see huge crowds coming out to see her. And
that's her, yeah.
And I think what was interesting to me about Nancy Fowler, she would claim these visions of Jesus and Mary. Oh, there she was on the news. Is that they did some brain scans on her, and they found that there was some abnormal activity, meaning that she was experiencing something. Now, her visions were never recognized by the Catholic Church. At some point, they stopped, and they just kind of faded away. And is she authentic? I've never thought so, but certainly the crowds came, and people wanted to believe.
So do you know what the local bishop's ruling was, if there was a ruling or investigation?
The only local bishop statements have always been of the non constat variety. So that's the Catholic maybe. Is not established as supernatural. So they didn't condemn it, they didn't approve it, they just left it in the middle.
Right. I should know this. I mean, is she still alive?
No, she has passed away. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think the general census is like that's not one people put much stock in. I get maybe it's just because there's many other ones that people have greater faith in. So,
I mean, I think that a lot of people wanted to see her as a true visionary, and we don't know, but
on page 75 in your book, you actually kind of list some of the Vatican guidelines. And again, maybe this has changed, but I just thought this was worth mentioning. Number one, are there glaring errors in facts? Number two, doctrinal errors attributed to God or Mary. Number three, pursuit of financial gain. That's a pretty good one. Number four, gravely immoral acts committed by the visionary. And number five, psychological disorders or tendencies in the visionary. So are those still good?
Yes, all those are still present in the new norms, the 2024 norms. Those are the red flags, you might say, that would make the church know immediately that that's not a true vision.
Yeah. Now, Garabandal.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and your take on it?
So this is an apparition to children in Spain in the 1960s, and I would say that of all the emails I get into my inbox of people interested in Marian apparitions, Medjugorje has the most people wanting to know more, and then Garabandal is the second most. And I think that one of the reasons why people are so excited about Garabandal is because there's video footage.
Yeah,
and I think that these strange videos of the children sort of walking backwards or kind of walking up a hill, or their head to the sky, or maybe even receiving communion supposedly.
So what we're seeing here for people who are listening is the video footage of Garabandal where there's children, they get on their knees and they're looking up, their necks are very strained upwards, looking at visions of the Blessed Mother. And then at certain points in this video, they walk backwards rather fast.
Yep.
And Michael, it starts looking creepy to me. It doesn't look, I mean, again, this is just an appearance, so some people are going to probably bite my head off, but it doesn't look holy. It looks creepy. And I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the videos both cause people to believe, and they also cause people to question, because when we think of, the children at Fatima, for example, we don't hear reports of this sort of behavior. But again, it seems like something interesting is happening here, but the church has never recognized it.
Yeah. I wonder why. I mean, did they get messages or something? I mean, what was the purpose of this apparition?
Yeah, they did. They definitely received visions and messages. But the local bishop who investigated, he said, no constava in Spanish, non consta in Latin, maybe.
This is them walking backwards.
Yeah. And so every bishop of San Sebastián de Garabandal after the first one keeps saying what he said. They keep kicking it back to the original statement. No bishop has taken up a new investigation since the 1960s. And there are lots of Catholics who are curious about, and of course, we're talking about a warning and a sign that's being prophesied. So I think that just like Medjugorje, where they talk about a great sign for people to see, if the sign doesn't appear, we all know that it's false. And then if there's no warning and that sort of thing for Garabandal, we know that one's false. So
right.
The proof is in the pudding at some point, but we all want to know sooner than later, I think.
Do you know anything about the visionaries? What happened to them?
They're still alive.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do they still talk about this? Is this like a part-time job, or they go around and talk about this? I mean,
they've stayed quiet, and I know that there was one of the visionaries appeared on a talk show at one point, a late night talk show. This is probably in the 1980s, if I remember correctly. But I thought that was very interesting. That's not a typical place that you would see a visionary interviewed, but they're quiet now. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, look, maybe it's true. I don't know. All I want to know, this is why I wish the church would rule on these things a little bit more definitively, because I just want to be a good son of the church. I just want to believe what the church says, right? But all of this, I think you've emphasized, and we should have probably said this 2 hours ago, but all of this is private revelation. And even Fatima, even Our Lady of Guadalupe, even Lourdes, we don't have to believe in them. And you can be a perfectly fine Catholic and still believe in them. Am I right?
You're exactly right. I like to say that, with Guadalupe, you could say, I think that's just a painting. You could, and you could still be a good Catholic. Or at Lourdes, you could say the thousands of miracles are there, investigated by science. You could say science doesn't know what it doesn't know yet, and maybe there's other explanations. And you could say at Fatima, the children were just making up, they wanted attention. You could say all those things. People should, send me an email if you do. But I think those are some of the great miracles of our church. But these are a private revelation. These are not required for belief with our faith. So
even when the church in the past, which would approve it, I mean, what was the language that they would say it's approved? Like, we rule that this really happened? Or, what was the phraseology? Because
they would use this Latin formulation, this constat de supernaturalitate. It is established as supernatural. So that means that it is good for all the Christian faithful to believe in, but not required.
Okay, so it's not so. You've said that phrase like 10 times. I know.
They're saying that it is established as supernatural. So they're saying it's definitely supernatural, but the faithful are not obliged.
Right. That's the funny part. That's what I'm really getting at. Is the church has said this is established as supernatural. The church is saying that, but I don't have to believe it. It's just kind of an odd place to be.
I think it's perfect.
Really?
Because they're doing all the investigation. They're being rigorous about it. They're overturning every rock, and they're saying everything that we've seen and we've learned, this is truly a miracle, but it doesn't complete divine revelation. It may help your faith. So even though the church is saying that we've done everything we can to say it's established, it's not required.
Yeah, it's not doctrine. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Not doctrine, So, okay.
I think I've always thought that stance was absolutely perfect, that we've done all the work, we've given everything you need to know, you can have faith in it, you can feel good about, this decision, but not required, optional.
That is perfect. That is perfect. You're right. You're right. I mean, that's a wonderful place to be, as opposed to the church trying to add to Holy Scripture, add to revealed truth. That would be a real problem if they did that.
And then if something got over, revealed later that somebody was making something up or something wasn't real, then what do you got? So I think it's the absolute perfect stance of the church.
What about I'm going to mispronounce it again, so I'm not even going to say it. The Coptic Marian image, Zeitoun. Zeitoun. You want to tell us about that? Because that's pretty cool, but it's also not Roman Catholic.
Correct. So we have a case, 1968 to 1971, where at St. Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church outside of Cairo, there was this claim, and it's beyond a claim because there were so many witnesses. You have Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists gathering in the thousands. When Mary would appear on these random occasions on the top of this Coptic Orthodox church. And
there she is.
There are various photos that have circulated. There's been the report that this didn't happen every day, but there were days when this did happen, and it was witnessed by so many people, and there's doves in the sky, lights in the sky, strange phenomena. Yep.
Oh.
And
those are the drones over New Jersey.
looks about the same, doesn't it? So yeah, pretty strange, right?
Wow,
pretty interesting.
Look at that.
And there are no messages associated with it. I mean, there were numerous miracles and healings, but the crowds would come out in big numbers. And I guess the local authorities were getting so sick of this happening that they turned off the power to the town in case they thought this was a light projection or some kind of thing that would require some kind of tech to produce. And so they did that, and the lights kept coming despite all the power being shut off. So that's pretty interesting. And there are reports, although I haven't been unable to unearth this, that this was filmed and broadcast on live Egyptian television. So I haven't seen those videos, but there's that claim. But to me, this is one of the more remarkable things that we've ever seen. So, yeah.
And this image, somebody would ask, "Was this like a negative? Like, what? Why is it black and white like this?" I mean, this was in a 68,
68 in Egypt. So I don't know.
Yeah, they're probably really old technology. Then.
I don't know. What they were dealing with, but that's all we have to go with. So.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of questions about this, but this is quite the claim, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is that this would have been on the path of the Holy Family going to Egypt.
Oh.
And so that's the connection that's been pointed out to me.
That's very cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very, very cool.
And strangely, there are other Coptic apparitions that have been claimed over the years at different other places, similar to this. A handful, maybe 5 or less, but yeah. And we might say, what is the Catholic Church's position on this? Apparently, the Catholic Church sent a representative to investigate it, and even though it's under the purview of another church, we've acknowledged it in some way.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn to I'm going to the paint on the rock, Lajas.
Las Lajas.
Las Lajas.
Yes.
Las Lajas.
Which means the flagstones in English. So this is a place I always wanted to go to, and I went there this past year.
Oh, good.
So this is one of the most beautiful churches. There I am. Beautiful church in a ravine, actually. It's incredible, the architecture. And it's pretty hard to get to. It's in Colombia, in Ipiales, and
Kevin, his wife is from Colombia.
Is that right?
You guys got to go there next time, Kevin.
Right. Yeah, it's one of the most incredible churches you can get to, and and the Colombian people are amazing, very faithful people. But when you go inside the church, you see this image on a rock, which is behind the altar. And the story is that in the 1700s, there was a woman, Marian Meneses, I believe her name, and her daughter Rosa, who was blind and deaf. And they were walking outside, and it was pouring rain. And so the daughter went running into a cave in order to get out of the rain. And the mother followed her in. And when she went in, they saw a vision of Mary appearing to the girl, and she regained her hearing and her eyesight or her speech. I can't remember which she had. But then left behind was this image emblazoned in the rock. And so that rock, when they came back and called the townspeople to come back and see it, they built this giant Gothic church on the spot. So it's pretty amazing.
When was this?
In the 1700s, yeah.
Now, my understanding is the amazing thing about this is that the paint goes multiple inches into the rock. Is that right?
Yep. So that is the claim that this image actually protrudes back into the rock, which I think is remarkable. I have not seen that with my own two eyes, of course, but that is the claim.
But they've drilled into it and pulled rock out from a couple inches back, and it still has the same color. So I think the claim is that if you were to cut off an inch of this rock, the image would still be there.
You'd still have some sort of coloration behind it. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's impossible. Like,
Right.
how could they have, even if it was painted, how could they have projected paint inches deep into this rock? That's
Right.
impossible.
And that's why this is considered one of these chiropoita images, if this claim is true.
Yeah, it's an amazing one. Do you know who those guys are?
You think I would,
That's all right.
but yeah,
You can't keep it all in your mind, you know. It's probably on your website somewhere.
you got it. It is.
Yeah, miraclehunter.com.
Thank you for that.
Miraclehunter.com. Yeah, awesome website. And you started that website a long time ago, right?
Yeah, I have to admit that when I started that, I totally started it secretly. I started, I wanted, like I said, there's no resource on the Vatican website, and I wanted to build my own site.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started loading it with, there's thousands of apparitions, for example, on there. And so I didn't tell anybody I was doing this. I was at an engineering job at the time, and I don't know, I wasn't planning on turning into the miracle hunter, but I set this site up just as a resource for the faithful. And I've been building it over the years. So
Let's pull it up, Kev. You got a second here?
Thanks.
We'll just take a look. And then we're going to move to Healing Miracles, Incorruptibles. So here you are.
Yep.
So, and you've had multiple episodes or series on EWTN.
Yes, correct.
It's really well done. I mean, the quality is great.
Thank you.
You know. So, anything particular you want to point out on here?
Well, you can see flashed up here is National Geographic. That was fun to do that. And in various Dr. Oz show, other opportunities that have come up. But
That's some big names.
Yeah. I've been amazed to see the interest in this work. But I think everybody wants to believe in miracles on some level.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. Now let's turn to healing miracles. So we've covered, the Tilma, the Shroud, Stigmatics. You call them Stigmatics?
So I think there are different ways of saying it. So Stigmata is the phenomena, but Stigmatists and Stigmatics are
Okay.
Yeah.
Marian Apparitions, Healing Miracles.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what is the most scientifically inexplicable miraculous healing you've seen? Like, so the one that just science just can't touch.
So I love that. This is a story that I love. And I did this program, Miracles of Padre Pio, for EWTN a couple of years ago. And we told the story of Padre Pio and his stigmata and some of the phenomena around him. But one of the things that's amazing are some of the miracles that he worked in his life and after his death. And we interviewed the family who had the miracle that related to his canonization. We were in Italy for that. We got to interview. That's an amazing story. A man who was in a car wreck, who his life was absolutely ruined, and he's had a complete healing. It's amazing. But the story that stuck out to me the most was the story of Vera Calandra. So in New Jersey, there was this family, the Calandras, and they had a husband and wife had a young daughter, maybe 2 years old, and she had all kinds of medical problems, issues with her stomach, and she was on death's door. And I remember the Calandras, they owned a grocery store, and everybody who would come into the grocery store, after they would order their food, they'd say, "Pray for Vera." And so the whole community was behind, the very sad situation. And somebody told the mother, you need to go to Italy and see this priest, this Capuchin friar. His name is Padre Pio. He's a living saint. This is in 1968 or 1967, 68. And so they saved up their money and they went to their doctors and said, we want to bring our daughter Vera, take her to Italy and get this blessing. And the doctor said, okay, I guess. But if you do, your daughter may die on the way, on the plane flight. So they said, we're going to need to remove her bladder, and you're going to have to hook her up to some bags and tubes and things. And they agreed to do that. They took out her bladder. They had her hooked up some way to these different tubes. The mother and 2 children got on the plane, and they went to see Padre Pio. And I should mention that the real reason they went is because the mother had a dream of Padre Pio, a vision, come to Italy and come quick, okay? And so that caused them to go to the doctor and get this surgery done, and they went. And so they did get to see Padre Pio, and he blessed them, and he said, what took you so long? And then they went back home. And that was it. And so when they got back home, they received the news from Italy that Padre Pio had died. This is 1968. So they went back to the doctor, and the doctor did the checked on Vera and saw that she was feeling better. And I guess she had started eating, she could eat a hamburger now, and before she was just barely eating anything. And so they kind of reported, her change in appetite and that she was feeling better. And so they did a scan, and the bladder had grown back.
Wow.
And you don't need to be a doctor to know that bladders don't grow back. Yeah. And so the obvious explanation is, well, whoever did the scan originally, whoever did the surgery originally, probably wasn't that good of a doctor. Maybe he cut out the wrong organ, or said he didn't, but he didn't really do it, or there's some kind of explanation. The surgeon was C. Everett Koop, the future Surgeon General of the United States.
Whoa. Wow.
And so I got to interview her for the show, for the EWTN program.
The daughter,
who's now in her 40s or 50s. Yeah.
That's kind of amazing, because I did not know the story. I don't know how I didn't know the story. But Michael, when I put my agnostic or atheist or skeptic hat on, one of the things I say, because I heard an atheist talk about this, they said, oh, there's all these miracles. You get sight to the blind, you cure cancer. But where's the amputee that got his leg back? Where are those? And that's kind of a good argument. But here we actually have a major organ that just reappeared. And this was not some quack doctor. It was the future Surgeon General of the United States of America. That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's my favorite. My favorite.
I see why. That's remarkable. How does the church distinguish between medical remission and miraculous healing?
So when we talk about, and we haven't talked about this much yet, we said, sadly, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith no longer investigates miracles in the same way, or at least they don't give the same kind of assurance and statements of miracles. But the dicastery for the causes of saints actually does do full-on investigations of healings. And those are the ones that are used for canonization causes. They actually need the miracles. I guess the other dicastery doesn't need the miracles anymore, but
right.
But for the cause of saints, they need the miracles to make the saints. So for every sainthood cause, there's 2. And they still use this Lambertini criteria, which is named for this Prospero Lambertini. He's an Italian cardinal born in the 1600s. And they use his criteria even today. And that's the same criteria that they use at Lourdes to investigate the Lourdes cures. And so that criteria says that it must be a cure of a serious condition, not liable to go on its own, It must be an instantaneous, complete, and lasting cure, and there can be no medical treatment that relates to the cure. So that's the criteria that every miracle that you ever see the Vatican pronounce for a canonization, it's gone through that criteria. And so, it can't be a common cold that goes away a little faster than you'd expect. You can't be blind in two eyes and have one eye come back good and the other eye doesn't. And when it comes to cases like cancer, they don't look at anything unless it's been 10 years. So there have been cases where, something like somebody's been cured of cancer, then they get hit by a bus. They can't use that miracle because it didn't pass the years of remission or getting out of remission. So they typically don't like to touch those cases because of the possibility that it might come back. So it has to follow this other criteria, though.
Did canonization used to require 3, and now they require 2?
So, yes. So Pope John Paul II, he in his document Perfectionis Magister, he changed the rules from 3 to 8 to 2. So in the past, there was any number of up to 8 miracles that could be used, but now it's 2, and one is for beatification, and the second one is for canonization. You can't. You can use an older miracle for beatification, but when it comes to canonization, you have to wait till it happens after the beatification. So you can't play 2 cards at once,
Oh, okay.
You can't hop straight ahead to canonization. The closest case that I know of relates to John Paul II. There was a woman in South America watching the canonization on her TV, and she prayed to John Paul II during the beatification mass. I said canonization. It was during the beatification mass, and she received a healing. She heard a voice from John Paul II, and she was healed during his beatification mass, and that was the miracle that was used for his canonization. But that was the closest call. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Have you seen The Chosen?
I've seen some episodes. Yes.
Little James, the character in there, he has a deformity of the hips or something like that, and there's a powerful scene in there. And some people don't like The Chosen. I do. Personally, I like it. But Jesus is walking around healing everybody, and little James doesn't want to ask, but the other guys are nudging him. Hey, go ask him to heal you. You have dinner with him every night. Just ask him. He's like, no. But eventually one day, Jesus and little James kind of have this little discussion, and it's a very powerful scene. But Jesus basically explains, look at the beauty you're able to bring into these by your own disability. You're able to bring into these other people's lives, and then James is healing people, and yet he still has a problem. I'm not doing it justice, but it is quite beautiful. It is quite a beautiful scene, and it kind of helps me sometimes understand why God might not heal someone. Why he might let certain things persist. So I was going to ask about the role of miracles in canonization, but you nailed that one. You got that one. But what's interesting, I think I got from your book, is there's only like 30 or something approved healing miracles in the U.S. or some.
That's correct.
Is that it?
That's correct.
You would think there's tons,
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people have this idea, at least I probably did, is that, if you were to report to your local parish priest that you had cancer and your cancer went away, that he would get on his red phone and call the bishop, and the bishop would pick up his red phone and call the Vatican and call the Pope, and the Pope would say, send out the miracle hunters. We're going to look into this one. And then they'd send the SWAT team of priests from the Vatican and investigate and come back and then declare it a miracle. It seems like that's how it should work, doesn't it?
Or
cool. I'd sign up for that.
Be a good
team.
TV show.
Yeah, I'd sign up for that team if they did. But no, the healing miracles are only investigated at Lourdes and at in canonization causes. Those are the only 2 places. I know Champion in Wisconsin, they're trying to start up their own Lourdes-like medical commission there. But other than that, those are the only 2 places where they actually investigate miracles.
Solanus Casey has gotten a lot of attention recently What do you know about have there been 2 miracles there for him? Is he good to go?
So we did an episode of They Might Be Saints for EWTN about him. We went up to Detroit and we filmed that, and we featured the first miracle for the beatification, and he's a blessed right now. He's not yet a saint. A healing of a skin condition, and the story of that miracle is that there was this there's this woman, Paula Zarate is her name, from South America, and she helped the priests and came to Detroit to visit, and she prayed in front of the tomb of Solanus Casey. You can go right up to the tomb; they have it there. And I guess she prayed and she heard a voice, and I guess she excused herself and went to her room or the bathroom, and she had this terrible skin condition where her skin was just red all the time, and she lost jobs because of it, and it was a huge embarrassment for her. Her whole body was covered with this difficulty, and so I guess she went into the bathroom, and then her skin started peeling off, and her whole body kind of molted almost. I don't know what you would say, and a layer of skin came off, and she gathered it up, and then she reported it to the priests, and then they went to the doctor, and her condition was completely cured. Wow. And that's the sort of the strange miracle attributed to Solanus Casey. So he's a blessed. They had 70,000 people at Ford Field. This was a time when the Detroit Lions weren't too good. I think they had more fans for Solanus than Detroit, but they're better these days, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, there's a new miracle that's being proposed, coming from Detroit, where a girl with tumors actually. They went to the tomb of Solanus, and she was going to have surgery or some kind of treatment, radiation, I'm not sure. And they went back for one final MRI before, they did the novena to Solanus Casey, and they went on his feast day or right after his feast day, and all her tumors were gone. Wow. So I don't know the full details of it other than that, but from what I've looked into it, that looks like it might be a pretty good one to boost them to saint.
When I hear about, especially children, we were talking a minute ago about why people would not be healed. And I know whenever I hear in the Catholic circles, particularly a child is sick, or anybody, but particularly children, I mean, it just tears your heart out. And very often there's a blessed that goes around almost virally and say, hey, invoke this blessed because he needs a miracle, and so do we, right? Or she. And one thing that I just think is worth noting is that people's concern for this child is a motivation for them to deepen their spiritual life. And so even when the child or anybody may not be healed, it spurs on the devotion. I mean, and that's a beautiful thing in and of itself.
Yeah, and I think even in the case of Carlo Acutis, who will be beatified in April, you have a case of a boy who, he died from leukemia at a very young age, and his own parents weren't that practicing. And perhaps it was because of his illness, but also because of his great example that they drew closer to the faith. So I think that's kind of a remarkable story.
That's a very strange thing to attend your own child's beatification or canonization.
Yeah, this may be one of the unique times in history, I think.
Yeah.
Given that canonizations have been moving faster than ever, and in previous times we probably wouldn't have seen this. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next on our list is Incorruptibles.
Yes.
And we've actually had a famous one very recently, Mother Wilhelmina.
Wilhelmina, yeah.
And we published, Tan just recently published her biography, but she made CNN headline news. Here she is. But I mean, she made big time news.
New York Times interviewed me for that story.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. It was pretty interesting. It was great. It was exciting to see them paying attention. Yeah.
So we'll get into her, but give us a little backstory to Incorruptibles, for people who don't know.
So incorruptibility is a really interesting phenomena, and it's another one of these complicated types of miracles. And so Do you know how many Catholic saints there are in history? 10,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Guess how many incorruptibles? 100.
Really?
It's a tiny fraction, right? And so, and when we talk about some incorruptibles where their bodies are preserved in a remarkable way, we see that some of them are preserved for hundreds of years. And then there are others who are less. And then you have someone like St. Catherine of Siena. If you go to Siena, she used to be incorrupt, I guess, but she doesn't look as good as she used to, you might say. So, and then you have some people like Padre Pio, who, even though he looks, in the images, he's actually wearing a wax mask, but his heart isn't corrupt. So you have some, incorruption of body parts. And as Catholics, we come up with these, these interesting ideas, like this saint's tongue is incorrupt because he was such a great speaker. This saint has a incorrupt heart because he loved God so much. Or, this saint's finger is incorrupt because she pointed the way to God, or whatever it is. We have to come up with these interesting little ways of describing it. And it's just very complicated. And I think that, I like to joke, nobody should ever start a sentence with the phrase, if I were God. But if I were God and I was going to come up with something like incorruptibility, I would, make sure the saints were incorrupt for head to toe, and they were incorrupt for all time, so all the faithful could always get to see them. And then only the saints who are real saints were incorrupt, so we know who was a saint and who wasn't. But I'm not God. God has something in mind here. But it is still remarkable that people like Sister Wilhelmina here in Missouri, we have cases of incorruptibility that science can't explain. Even though that she was buried in a wooden coffin and she was exposed to the elements, and people would expect the decomposition to happen, her body was preserved in a remarkable way. So it's a strange phenomenon, but I think God allows these rare cases to happen. They're not used for sainthood causes. This is not a sainthood miracle, but it gives the faithful a chance to reconnect with the saints, or to connect with the saints in a very primal way, you might say. We, as Catholics, we have relics, but this is the ultimate relic, I think, where we see the saints and we're connected to them.
Here she is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw this, I said, well, her face is looking great, but
Yes.
her hands don't look so good.
Yes.
So it's just,
So again, that sort of complication that I'm relaying that, we see.
she's not mummified.
Correct.
I mean, she's just there. I mean, her face looks pretty normal, you
Yeah.
know? Now, is the theology behind this related to the result of sin is death? Therefore, the holier you are, the less you died. That's not the right word, but
Yeah,
is it like your
I have to
body's
be-
preserved
I have to
because
be
you had
honest.
less sin?
I don't know if there's a true theology to incorruption that we can come up with. Partly because there's such variability.
Mm-hmm.
Are truly the top 100 saints incorrupt?
Right.
I don't think we can go
Can't
there.
play
Yeah,
those
yeah.
games. Yeah.
So I just think it's kind of a complicated, interesting thing. And we talk about Saint Bernadette Soubirous. She, perhaps her body is most perfectly preserved of all the saints. I think. So when you go there, that's kind of a remarkable thing to see her. But other than giving us a chance there she is, to be connected with the saints.
Is that a mask?
Yes, that's a light wax mask.
So why would they give masks if they're incorruptible? Why don't they just let us see it?
Yep, and there I am.
There you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it is a good question. And some people have said to me, oh, isn't this the church being kind of funny? Aren't they pushing something off, like Carlo Acutis, for example? You've probably seen his body, and that's a silicone mask on him, although he looks perfectly incorrupt. And so we might say, is the church trying to pull one over on the faithful? And to some people, they might feel that way, but I think that they're actually just trying to have the faithful see the saints as they really were, and to remember that they were real people. So, but that isn't to say that it isn't all complicated. It's a little complicated. Yeah.
Eucharistic Miracles, that's a big one for you. I think you have a book coming out.
Yeah.
Did it come out yet? With
No.
Sophia?
No.
It's with Sophia, our friends at Sophia, wonderful publishing company, Eucharistic Miracles. Tell us about that in general. This has been heavily researched. There's a lot of interesting cases. So let's just talk about that for a little bit.
So one of the things that I think is, as I mentioned, that all miracles are a little bit complicated, right? We talked about Marian Apparitions. You have to rely on the witness. Incorruptibility, there's variability. Stigmata, there's variability. Weeping statues, why is it happening? We don't get any messages. What's happening? So, the healing miracles, those are beautiful, but I think there's always questions. But when it comes to scientific inquiry into miracles, I think Eucharistic miracles are the really interesting ones, because we have on some very, very rare cases true flesh and true blood being found on or made manifest on a Eucharistic host. So I think it's remarkable. I've had the great blessing of traveling to the 5 most highly recognized Eucharistic miracles in modern times. Lanciano in Italy, which is a very old Eucharistic miracle, but more recently investigated. Buenos Aires in Argentina, Tixla in Mexico, and then Sokolka and Legnica in Poland. And I was able to film at all those places for EWTN. And the access I was given was amazing. I got to interview the priests who discovered the hosts. I got to be up as close as I wanted to those hosts. It was truly special to do, and to travel all over the world to do it was really amazing. I would say that one of the complications with Eucharistic miracles, and I think that they're so fascinating because, like in Tixla, in Mexico, the blood is coming from the inside of the host. So there's a question did somebody steal a host and know exactly the blood type to wipe on it and then turn it back into the priests and trying to say that they have a Eucharistic miracle? Is there something funny going on, But in the case of Tixla, the blood is coming from the inside of the host. You can't fake that. The case of Sokolka, on a microscopic level, the flesh and the bread are completely intertwined in a way that's uncreatable by science. They have no idea how it's that way. And the fact that they found living white blood cells in Buenos Aires, for example, that's amazing. White blood cells don't exist after 30 minutes of being outside the body. So there have been some remarkable discoveries in these cases. But I think going forward, what would be nice is if for Eucharistic miracles they had a standard investigative process. I think one of the reasons that this information hasn't been presented to the world and received by the world is because in each case, the local bishop finds his own scientist. They have their own protocol of what to look for, their own test what to look for, then create a report that the bishop then has to interpret. But I think if there were a standard process for investigation, I think this would be truly an amazing thing to share with the world.
So right now, there's not much of a process. It's just local bishops get together and start dealing with it.
Yep. They find a local scientist who's willing to investigate it and then run some tests. And the tests are remarkable, but they need to have a standardized process.
Are you familiar with the Eucharistic miracle that's preserved in Siena?
Yes.
Can you remind me of the name of that? What would you call that? Do you know?
Oh, you mean like the preservation miracle, right?
Yeah, where it's just and it's in the Franciscan church there. And I just don't remember what you call that miracle. I forget.
Oh, a miraculous preservation, I guess.
Right. No, I just mean is there a name of of the town or of the event? They call it something. If this was a chapter in your book, what would it be called? But anyway, so my boys and we were traveling Italy, and the Franciscans in that church basically rent out rooms, and so we stayed there not knowing that there was a Eucharistic miracle preserved right there. And Father Alfred, this Franciscan guy from India, because Siena, by the way, has had no vocations. I mean, they have one seminarian for the entire diocese of Siena, I think Siena has actually been consumed into another diocese because they had no. So most of the priests there are transplants. They're missionaries from third world countries. So you have these Indian Franciscan friars there that care for this church, and the primary purpose of this is to care for this Eucharistic miracle. And we didn't even know that. We just signed up to stay there. And so he takes us in and he gets us into the chapel, and he allows us to just go right up to the glass, kind of like you are here, but because no one was in there. And then I got to just do a holy hour alone in this chapel. My kids were going and doing something.
Amazing. And
it's just right there. And I'm allowed to walk right up behind the altar and go up to the glass. And there, that story there was basically a ciborium of hosts that was stolen, and then somebody felt guilty about it, and then they stuck it into a poor box.
Right. That's it.
And then, however many days later, somebody found it in the poor box filled with cobwebs and everything. So then, but it never dissolved, like it never dissipated. It's just been there for hundreds of years now, if I understand it right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting one too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they have a whole documentation on the different times throughout history it's had scientific investigation where the bishops. So it looks very legitimate.
Yeah. So I think that there are, hundreds of Eucharistic miracles around the world of different sorts, and miraculous preservations and this flesh and blood type of Eucharistic miracle. But Carlo Acutis famously documented that on his website. So,
Yeah, he did. That's kind of what he did, right?
Yes.
He went around with the video camera.
He's my patron saint for that
Right.
reason.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
And I actually got to interview his mother on my radio show. And off the air, she said, "I have to tell you, Carlo loved your website when he was alive."
Amazing.
So that was pretty fun.
Oh, that's
pretty fun.
That would make all the work worthwhile.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about one of the strangest ones to me is Saint Januarius, if I'm saying it right. And Kevin, did I give you a clip for that?
Just pictures.
Pictures. Talk about this one. This was cool.
So this is one of the strangest, most remarkable miracles we have in our Catholic Church. And so St. Januarius was a 3rd century bishop martyr, and now he is one of the 30 patron saints of Naples, even though he's the number 1 patron, San Gennaro. On his feast day every year, the crowds show up in a big way to his cathedral. And strangely, when he was martyred, like we Catholics like to do, they saved his blood. And they save it in this thing called an ampule. It's like a reliquary made of glass. And so,
like a monstrance almost.
Yes, it almost looks like a monstrance. Right?
Kevin, and you can find the video. I know it's on YouTube or something where you see the priest like holding it up and he's like shaking it like this.
Yes.
Something like that. It's
So
probably on YouTube.
So what the blood is dry, as you'd expect from the 3rd century. And so on his feast day, the bishop comes and says the Mass. And at some point in the Mass, he stops the Mass and he walks over to this ampule and picks it up. And he turns it sideways, and the blood is no longer dried blood. It starts sloshing around, and it's liquid. And so, it's if you're there, and I was there with my film crew, and to see this event. And I thought, maybe there won't be that many people there. You couldn't even get in. The church was packed. You had to be out in the streets. They had screens outside to watch it. And so it's truly amazing. When Pope Francis went there, the blood liquefied.
Like just for him?
Yes.
Like beyond the regular date?
Yes, correct.
The sign that San Gennaro.
St. Januarius, yeah. So you'll see how he'll turn it sideways. So this church is completely packed.
Yeah, that's all right. There's some other videos of the priest like moving it around, sloshing around. Anyway,
what's so interesting about it is that the cheer that the crowd gives out for this strange phenomenon is as loud as a game-winning touchdown in a football game in Texas, because it has great meaning for the people of Naples. And what is that meaning? It's not just we have a saint who does this funny trick every year. This blood liquefies every year on his feast day, except in the years that it doesn't. In the years that it doesn't, you have the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, an earthquake, financial collapse, war, coronavirus. On some years, the blood does not liquefy. So perhaps in something similar to superstition or fear that it's not going to liquefy, they cheer big time when that blood liquefies.
Wow. It's almost like really Catholic version of Groundhog's Day. Like when the groundhog comes out, it's like supposed to say something. So are they saying when they see the liquefied blood,
it's going to be a good year?
It's going to be a good year?
Yes.
That's
the idea.
Wow, so, that's pretty cool. I mean, we need to watch that live on Facebook or something next year.
And I did a video. Like
What's the date?
It is his feast day. It might be September 19th. I could be wrong on that one. But.
All right, we're going to check it out.
Yeah.
We're going to try to watch it. They got to live stream that sucker.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
and again,
awesome.
I did a video for EWTN for that, so you can watch that for the whole history. Yeah.
And I know you get asked these questions all the time. But do you have a favorite Eucharistic miracle? I mean, maybe you've already. Oh, look, this. Oh, look, it's during COVID year. You can see he's got, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe COVID year, maybe not. But it looks like it's going to slosh around.
Yeah, that one is liquid. Yeah.
So let's see if he's kind of there.
We were wearing masks for a while. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, it's moving around. You can definitely see it sloshing around. Amazing.
And what's interesting about that blood, or the liquid in there, is it's never been tested outside of the ampule. They've never opened it up and sampled the blood. What they've done is they've done chromatography, meaning they send light through it, and they can tell what's contained in the liquid. So it contains all the elements of blood, but they've never actually done the test of opening it. So that, again, there's a curiosity there. But
and this was a Eucharist that just...
No, this is the blood of Saint Januarius.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, because we were on Eucharistic miracles, but it's not a Eucharistic miracle.
Correct.
It's blood from his martyrdom.
Yes.
And did he have his head cut off?
Yes.
Okay. And so then they collected it,
Yes.
and it just solidifies. That's really, really cool. So,
Yeah. So
it looks like a Eucharistic miracle because it's in one of those, monstrances. So
exactly,
it threw me off for a second.
Yes,
Which
another
I knew
blood
that.
miracle, right? So there it is.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So back to, do you have a famous Eucharistic miracle or
favorite?
Yeah. That one's not Eucharistic, but
So, there are so many different Eucharistic miracles that have happened, but I do believe that the flesh and blood type are the amazing kind, in the sense that this is something that, there are a lot of stories of Eucharistic miracles, but the fact that all the Eucharistic miracles exhibit the same blood type, which is type AB, and they are not able to extract DNA from them, which is kind of curious. But I guess maybe God doesn't want to be cloned. I'm not sure if that's part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Or the samples are just too damaged and they can't. I'm not sure which it is. But I'd say that the Lanciano miracle in Italy is perhaps the most meaningful.
Because there, as you mentioned earlier, the flesh and the accidents of bread merged together.
Well, currently there's only they only have the flesh remaining.
Oh,
so,
the bread's gone.
Correct.
The accidents of bread is gone.
Yeah. But I do think the Sepulchre miracle, for example, the one where it's intertwined completely, to me that's maybe the most remarkable. The most remarkable aspect.
Well, what is this thing about it comes from the interior part of the heart?
Sure. So the claim is that all the Eucharistic miracles are from heart muscle. So I think that's kind of a remarkable thing, and we could draw our own conclusions about the meaning behind that. But I think that's pretty interesting, and the correspondence of the blood type, of course, is interesting as well.
And so not just from a heart muscle, but then sometimes there's the element of a heart under extreme duress.
Yes, correct. Yes. So I think that one of the remarkable things is in Sokolka and Legnica, in Poland especially, and also in Buenos Aires. This is probably interesting to mention, that the investigators who looked at the Eucharistic host at the request of Jorge Bergoglio, the bishop there in Buenos Aires, before he became Pope Francis, they sent the sample to the United States. And the sample was sent to Columbia University, where the scientist who looked at it, he said, yes, this is heart muscle, and this is from a person who was tortured. And so, and the presence of white blood cells especially was curious and made the scientist think that it happened very recently. that this was a recent, a sample of somebody who was recently killed. So, so there, again, I think there are all kinds of remarkable aspects to these Eucharistic miracles. I would love to see standardization, across the board, to have that testing be the same so that this could be presented in the world in a way that the world could accept.
Yeah. We've covered a lot. Last category I had is weeping statues. And I didn't have as many questions on it, but I'll just let you take it away and talk about weeping statues because there's quite a few.
Yeah. So weeping statues is a remarkable phenomenon. And I think that one of the interesting aspects or the complicated aspects is the why. If a statue of the Virgin Mary cries tears of blood or human tears or tears of oil, which happens in all different cases, why does it happen? And perhaps Mary is expressing her sorrowful heart and asking us to repent, perhaps, but we don't really know. So I think there's that aspect. But we see weeping statues all over the world. Russia is famous for weeping statues, and Greece is famous for weeping statues. And even in the United States, there have been some cases, like in Hobbs, New Mexico, just a few years ago. There was this bronze statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe that wept tears of oil on 4 different occasions, and it was investigated by the local bishop, Bishop Oscar Cantu of Las Cruces in New Mexico, and he investigated it, and they declared it miraculous. And I actually was able to go to Mexico to the foundry that created the statue, and they had, hundreds of Guadalupe statues all over in bronze. And I asked them, so do you make all, weeping statues here? And, they said, no, we call her La Milagrosa, the miracle worker. She's the only one that we've ever had. And they had made this giant statue, sent it to New Mexico or to the United States. And it's amazing. Even here, you can see videos online, people going and capturing it on their iPhones. Even, this weeping statue here in the United States. So these things happen. The meaning of them is just unknown.
And I guess weeping statues would be one of the easier ones for fraudulent, activity, right? I mean, maybe there's different ways you can kind of fake that. And so, if I was a fraud, I'd probably pick that kind of activity because it's going to be hard to fake an incorruptible or a Eucharistic miracle.
Yes, correct. So the idea is that during these investigations, they look for internal mechanisms or ductwork to make sure that, behind the statue or the icon, there's not something streaming those tears out through the front, or a leaky pipe would be a natural explanation, or somebody sneaking in with an eyedropper overnight. But when they have cameras on that, like in the case of New Mexico, they're able to check this. So,
have you heard of the guy who? This is crazy. Only in the Catholic Church, but this guy who could spit like long distances with extreme accuracy, and he would stand in front of the statue and spit while people were around, and it would look like tears.
Wow,
it's crazy.
I've not heard of that one.
Crazy, crazy.
That's the most interesting miraculous claim I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, so it's just people find any kind of ways to make fraudulent, but there are real ones. Now, Akita, which I don't know a lot about, but that had a heavy dosage of a weeping statue, right?
Yes. So in 1973 in Akita in Japan, we have this case of Sister Agnes Sasagawa, who was a nun there who was deaf, and she, on one occasion, was drawn into the chapel by a light coming from the chapel, as the story goes. And then when she went into the chapel, she began to look in front of a weeping and bleeding statue, a wooden statue in the style of Our Lady of All Nations. And that statue wept on 101 occasions, and blood came out of the hands of this statue. And what's interesting, this nun who was deaf, her hearing returned when she encountered the statue. And they examined the tears and the blood, and they found that they were human tears and human blood, not matching, anybody on site, the priest or this nun or anything. And she just passed away this past year, Sister Agnes did. So, but that is one of the more remarkable miracles that happened, and there were claims of messages as well that she received. So, it's an interesting case. But perhaps my favorite case of a weeping statue happened in Syracuse in Italy. This is in the 1950s, I suppose. The Januso family, there was this husband and wife who just got married, and they were given a plaster image of Our Lady, and they put it on their wall, and they weren't that pious of a family, I guess, but the woman's eyesight, she lost her eyesight all of a sudden. And they began to pray in front of this statue on the wall. And then on one day, her eyesight returned. And when she looked up and saw this plaster statue, it began to weep tears. And the townspeople came, hundreds and hundreds of people lined up to see the statue weeping. The police confiscated the statue and took it to the police station. I'm not sure what they were supposed to do with that, but and they investigated and they found it to be human tears. And even the Pope got on Vatican radio and said there's a weeping statue in Syracuse, Italy, and now there's a basilica built on the site.
What year was that?
I believe it was the 1950s, 1953 maybe, something like that. But
amazing.
Yeah.
Great stories.
So anyway, so these things happen all over the world, even in the United States.
Yeah, weeping statues. It must, if there's a commonality there, it must be, but it's likely to be the sorrowful mother. Oh, here we are.
Yep.
Do you know which one that is, Kevin?
That's Syracuse.
That's Syracuse. Mm-hmm. Wow, incredible.
Yeah,
incredible. Closing comments. We've covered a lot. We've done everything from the Tilma, the Shroud, the Stigmata, Marian Apparitions, Healing Miracles, Incorruptibles, Eucharistic Miracles, Weeping Statues. So we covered.
Yeah, you got the full set.
We covered a lot. Yep. But again, you're probably asked this all the time, but is there one particular out of all these different categories that's the most personally moving for you personally? I mean, you have really dug deep into these. Is there anyone that speaks to you in a personal way more than others? Perhaps it's the Tilma because of your backstory and how it got started, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I started miraclehunter.com with a focus on Marian apparitions, and since then I've branched out to the other types of miracles. But Marian apparitions will always be the most interesting to me because I think that it's remarkable that we have these times in human history where the Mother of God has walked amongst us and come to us as a mother caring for her children. And I think these stories are amazing and uplifting and pretty remarkable. And of course, I find the other miracles fascinating and interesting, and Eucharistic miracles, drawing people closer to the Eucharist, are so important. But for me, the type of miracle of Marian apparitions is for my greatest focus, and of course, Our Lady of Guadalupe. She'll always be number one for me.
Yeah. Now, are there any up and coming investigations that you're excited about?
Well, so I do have the privilege of being alerted to a lot of different things happening. Again, I've got the strangest email inbox in America. So I get all these reports of Eucharistic miracles all over the world coming to me, and where people, again, I think that maybe most of these cases you might see, maybe it's red bread mold. Maybe it's not truly a Eucharistic miracle. Maybe it's something that needs to be investigated. But coming, we will see some more Eucharistic miracles approved around the world. I think that this is something that's happening. They're just taking their time with the investigation. So
when it ends up in your inbox, are you doing anything with the diocese? Are you reaching out to the bishop and say, dude, you got to check this out?
I have done that on numerous occasions where I've passed along claims of miracles and for sainthood causes as well. I'm connected with many of the vice postulators throughout the United States who are all looking for miracles. And so anytime I have a hint of a miracle that might help their cause or that they should look into, I'm definitely passing along miracles to the investigators there.
That's awesome. Two last questions. If someone was skeptical about miracles, what single case would you point them to?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think I do love these Padre Pio miracles. I think they're pretty remarkable, and they've happened in modern times. So I think that's pretty interesting to look at the miracles of Padre Pio. I also think the Tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Shroud of Turin are pretty interesting when you dig into them. What we've got there,
especially because of all the science that's behind it.
Exactly right.
Last question: how has being the miracle hunter changed your faith, deepened your faith, changed your perspective on life in general?
Yeah.
But not everybody gets to be the miracle hunter.
It's an amazing journey, and I appreciate that question so much, because this has been truly the great blessing of my life, the chance to do this, to speak to those people who are working on sainthood causes and learning about the saints and interviewing those people who have experienced miracles and traveling the world and getting to the Eucharistic miracle sites and getting to get up so close to the Tilma and speaking to all the people who have had these miracles. The access is amazing, and I have to say that I don't take it for granted, in that I can't help but believe because of what I've seen and what I've learned. So this has truly been a remarkable journey.
I encourage everybody to check out miraclehunter.com. And I believe you're getting EucharisticMiracles.com up and going. Is that going yet?
Yes, it is. It currently points to miraclehunter.com, but with the advent of the new book and the television series, that'll be focused on that as well.
You've done a great service to the church. You continue to do it. You're a real treasure yourself for the church, because as I began, we have to catalog these things, and we have to have a competent, scientifically based, organized, faithful, devout Catholic catalog these things and articulate them. You've done a spectacular job at looking at these things in a truthful, balanced, humble way. And I just don't know how somebody could do a better job in this whole arena than you have done for many years, and hopefully many years to come. So God bless you and your work, and thank you for being here with us. It was a real honor to sit here with you.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.